Coming up this afternoon on the Dattitude podcast, who needs Barnum and Bailey when you can have the NFL bring the circus to town? That's my view of what we had in the Superdome on Monday night for opening night. Now we'll share some scenes from that. My favorite handicapper, Adam Chernoff, is going to be here, or at least he's going to be here virtually, and we're going to talk about inside the lines and why the lines have stayed the same. What does he like? Maybe some prop bets that he like. Matt Moscona of ESPN Radio is here. He has been maybe the most critical of the Saints the entire coaching process, coaching search process. He'll be on to talk about it later on, as well as Mike Detillier will be here about 2:20 this afternoon. We're going to get his take on the Saints coaching process as well. But first, we got to talk about this circus. Grab the peanuts, grab the cotton candy, and the candied apples, and let's start this show.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.
Where are you at, Dattitude family, and welcome to the circus we call the Super Bowl. We're back here on Radio Row. It's insane. I mean, the people that we had yesterday, it's dwarfs. I mean, the people that we had today, I should say, dwarfs the amount of people that were here yesterday. I'd say, I think we're up on 3 times. Norman, what do you think, 3 times what we had yesterday? I think it's at least 3 times. I mean, put it this way. I could see clear through to the Sirius XM booths without anyone walking in front of me for probably, but maybe 10 minutes of the 2 hours that we were sitting here yesterday. It is packed today. That means the Super Bowl is getting a little bit closer. Last night, opening night, that's what they call it now. It's no longer media day. First of all, they don't do it during the day anymore. We're going to talk about that because I have some comparisons to show you in just a little bit about the last time I covered this quote-unquote circus back in 2002 and how different it was, how different the dome looked, how different the floor looked, how different everything was. It was not this media spectacle that it is now. We're going to show you some comparisons. We're going to show you how close you could have gotten to Tom Brady in 2002. And interestingly enough, he's kind of behind, even though he was the starting quarterback in Super Bowl 36 in 2002. He was standing behind Drew Bledsoe, who was the backup quarterback, who was injured for most of the season. Everybody wanted to talk to Drew Bledsoe. No one wanted to talk to Tom Brady to show you how things have changed. Who would have known it? But anyway, back to the circus for today. The bad news is I am the only elephant in the circus today. The good news is this is Dattitude, episode number 341 for a Tuesday, February the 4th, 2025, presented to you by our friends at Evangeline Securities. And if you don't know it by now, I'm your host, Jim Derry, 34 years in this New Orleans sports media scene. And I got to say that last night was one of the craziest events that I've had the pleasure, I guess pleasure is the right way of covering it. We're going to jump right into it. You know, we got a lot of comments today as well, so we're going to get into the comments. Of course, as always, we welcome you to be a part of the show by typing in your comment, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our Dattitude YouTube page, ever growing. Man, we've had a really good couple of weeks. I think people are wanting to hear more about Kellen Moore, and I don't know if they're liking our viewpoint or wanting to come and be a part of the show, because that's what we do that most people don't do, is we are specializing in, we want you to be a part of the show. And so all you got to do to do that is type in, we're going to talk to you. Adam Chernoff is coming on in just about, 15 minutes or so. He is my favorite handicapper, okay? And look, even if you're not into the betting part of the Super Bowl, there's no question. I got an alert earlier. They're expecting $1.35 billion, and that's just at ESPN, to be bet on this current Super Bowl. To think about that, that's even more money than I can comprehend. That's so many zeros. There are so many zeros behind that. I mean, I'd have to fill up this entire screen showing you that. And we're going to talk about the betting market. Adam's going to tell you why the lines have stayed the same, because they really haven't moved. You see them on the screen here if you're watching live. The Chiefs are still a 1.5-point favorite. The total hasn't changed, a 48.5 over-under, which means if you don't understand the betting world, it means the betting market is, do you think there will be more than 48 points scored or less than 48 points scored? That's what that number means, or 48.5, I should say. So you can bet on that. They think it's going to be a lower scoring Super Bowl because in the past few years, we've seen numbers well into the 50s. We've seen numbers well in the 50s for a lot in these playoffs as well. So Adam will be talking about that. He may he'll tell us what he likes, maybe his best bet. I think I know which way he's leaning. Maybe he'll give us a prop bet or two. And I'll tell you, he gave us one for the Rams Super Bowl that I'm never going to forget because it helped me make some money. But he talked about, he goes in and tells you why, into detail, why he likes a certain bet. A couple years ago, it was Johnny Hecker to have the longest punt. And he went to this 3-minute diatribe about why Johnny Hecker was going to have the longest punt. It wasn't even close. That was like the easiest money I made the entire Super Bowl a couple years ago. So he'll be on. Matt Moscona, ESPN Radio, is going to be on. He has been, as I said in the open, probably the most critical of Mickey Loomis and the Saints organization in this entire coaching search. And I want to hear from him today. I went over and talked to him, see if he would come on. Great guest. But he is, let's say, candid, okay? You know me. I don't hold back. I tell you the way that I feel. Well, he's even more so, maybe even more so. So he's going to be coming on at I believe he's coming on at 1:50. And then at 2:20, we're supposed to have scheduled to have Mike Detillier, who may be a little bit late this afternoon, but he's going to be on at 2:20. We all know Mike Detillier of WWL, football analyst. He'll be talking about the Saints, what he thinks of Kellen Moore. What does he think about if Kellen Moore does come here? Kind of what we talked about a little bit about yesterday. What do the Saints need to do in the draft? Where do they need to fix things cap-wise? Will they get better in 2026? Because I'm under the impression that I do think that things are going to get better in 2026, certainly cap-wise. They can't get much worse. But if you go and look at where the Saints are cap-wise going into 2 seasons from now, not this coming season, they are not dead last. And if that were to happen, it would be the first time they got this far without being dead last in something like 4 or 5 years. Remember, we told you, this can has been kicked so much, it's not just dented, it's rusted, it's got a hole in it. You get your foot caught in it if you try to kick it anymore. So we'll talk about, Mike, about that with that. Back to the circus, though, before we have Adam coming on again. He's coming on about 1:20, so we've got about 11, 12 minutes to talk before we get to that. I'm going to take your comments in just a minute, but little vignette about last night. Walking my daughter to the bus stop this morning, 9-year-old Lucy, or almost 9 years old. She'll be 9 in 2 weeks. She says at the bus stop, she goes, "When you were at the Super Bowl last night, Daddy, did you talk to Travis?" And I'm thinking, a 9-year-old. Travis? What do you mean? I'm thinking it's like maybe a family friend that I can't, I'm 56, I forget things. I'm like, "What do you mean, baby? Travis?" She says, "Oh, you mean, Travis Kelce?" She says, "Yeah, Travis." No, I didn't get a chance to talk to Travis. She goes, "Well, I know you're going to the Super Bowl again on Sunday at the Dome." She says, "If you see Travis or if you see Taylor, would you tell him that your daughter said hello?" I said, "I'd be happy to." So if Travis Kelce or Taylor Swift's watching this show, 9-year-old Lucy Derry says hello. There you go. I thought it was one of the cute things. But the zoo last night. We're going to get into some pictures. We got some pictures. We got some video from last night that I want to show you. In fact, let me just put this scene set up. This was last night about 20 minutes before the players came out. There were bands playing. It was, I texted a friend of mine. I said it was kind of like, if you've ever been in the Endymion Extravaganza, it's kind of like the Endymion Extravaganza without the floats. Show that one more time. It was insane. I think there were more people on the floor down there than there were in the stands. And there were plenty of fans. I was impressed that a lot of the plaza was filled up. There were people in the loge, and actually I actually saw a couple of people. I think people who just wanted to be alone, didn't want people around them. A few people had scattered up to the terrace. I found that interesting. But into the biggest differences and what has changed so much. And look, I don't blame the NFL for trying to market. I joke about it being a circus. But if you were the NFL and you were Roger Goodell and you were the marketing people of the NFL, why wouldn't you want to have as many people as you possibly could have in there, right? I mean, for some fans, well, for a lot of fans, really, if you look at the ticket prices, the lowest ticket price I saw, I haven't looked since yesterday morning, but yesterday morning, it had come down from $4,200 to $3,400, And by the way, that's without the insanely absurd, should be illegal $1,100 fees that go along with those $3,300 tickets. That is the lowest price ticket. So for a lot of people out there, if you want to get a taste of the Super Bowl, you can see the field in person. You can see the players in person, even though they're not, they're not right in front of you. But this is one thing that the NFL did that I actually think is a good thing, allowing the fans in and letting them sit in there. But they have crammed so many media members in there that look, there are more media members that have week of passes than they're going to be at the game. I get that, but they don't ask questions anymore about, what do you think about the game? What about the matchup? Patrick Mahomes, what do you think about the Eagles defense? Saquon Barkley, what do you think about Steve Spagnuolo and how he's been defending the run? No, they don't ask that question. They ask questions like, do you like beignets? There was one in particular. There was one particular producer, I guess it was the director or whatever. He had about 3 or 4 of his people standing around me. Kept walking in front of me. I felt like I was at Bacchus. I'd been standing there. I'd watched Toth all day, and now I'm waiting for Bacchus to come along on Napoleon and St. Charles. And the people just start walking in front of me like you haven't been there all day. One of his people says, "Oh, he's being a body blocker." I'm like, "No, ma'am, I'm actually just standing here. I've been standing here waiting, see if I can get a question into Jalen Hurts." No. But to show you what the crowd was like, at some point I said, you know what, I give up. And here's what it looked like. This is when I had walked to one end of the dome to the other, along the sideline, and I realized, okay, I'm ready to go back, and this is what I have to walk back from. The pictures don't do it justice, but this is what I had to walk back from last night. It was quite the scene. For those of you who know the Dome well, and I know that's most of you watching this show, here's where we had, this was the work area and where we had dinner last night. In the garage, I'm not making this up, and around the Gate G garage in the Dome, I believe garage 6, they turned the garage into a working area. You could see the top bar there. I'm like, am I really in the garage? I actually had to, am I really in the garage? No, they put carpet down and everything. It was insane. So stuff you've never seen before, we saw last night, and it's just been insane. It's been insane. So let's get to some of the comments. Again, we're going to have Adam on in just a minute. Rocky, good morning. Yep, Matt, Mike, Adam, the Dattitude Nation, I'll be on today. Good morning, Randall. Hello. It's actually afternoon, and I can't get used to saying afternoon, by the way. I said this yesterday. I've been saying good morning for, I don't know, however long. We've been doing this live for, it'll be a year on March 1st. I still can't get used to saying afternoon. Good afternoon, Gary. Hello. Welcome. Nola Man. Looking forward to this show so you can make your Super Bowl bet. I'm telling you. Adam is definitely the one to follow. S. Callie. Good afternoon. Hello to me and the Who Dat Nation. Logan's can't wait. He's asking that question. What do I think of the possibility of the Saints hiring someone from the Eagles staff for defensive coordinator and running a Fangio 3-4 defensive scheme? Well, and that's a question, Logan. If you remember, come back and ask when Mike comes on. But we were talking about this yesterday, and I don't know that the Saints had the personnel to switch that at this point. That'd be kind of a massive change, I think. And I'm not sure that they have the personnel, and we know that they don't have the money to go out and get in free agency. They're not going to have free agency money, so I'm not sure that they're actually going to be able to go out and do that. But I think that's something that maybe in the future that they may switch to. Look, Kellen Moore, although obviously he's been an offensive coordinator for his entire career, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have ideas of what he wants on defense. And whatever he's thinking of on defense, again, assuming he's going to be the coach, he's going to bring in someone with his philosophy, obviously. One of the things, if you remember when Sean Payton brought in Steve Spagnuolo, and why Steve Spagnuolo was so successful with the Giants and obviously so successful with the Chiefs and winning 4 Super Bowls as a DC, but it was terrible here, because I think that he and Sean Payton didn't have the same philosophy. So if the head coach and the DC aren't on the same page, doesn't matter if one's an offensive guy, and obviously the other one's a defensive guy, If they're not on the same page, it's just not going to work. You could argue that, Rob Ryan just wasn't a very good defensive coordinator when the Saints were historically bad. But you could go back to that. You could, talk about that. But Dennis Allen came in, and Sean Payton and Dennis Allen did work well together. And Dennis Allen had already been here before for a short time, so they knew each other. And that's why I think things worked well when Dennis Allen came in. It's going to be the same for Kellen Moore, if that's whoever the next coach is. He's going to have to bring in his own guy, for sure. Nola Man, you looking forward to it? You have your Bet MGM pulled up so you can make some bets. Listen first. Don't just go. Look, we used to talk about this on Bayou Bets all the time. Just don't go willy-nilly bet something because we talk about it or have an expert on it. So listen to it and listen to. One thing that Adam will do is he will give you the reasoning behind it. There's lots of things Adam says that he gives me the reasoning, and I'm like, I hear you, but I don't necessarily, I don't jive with that. So I don't bet on it. I'm not going to bet everything that some expert tells him to bet. You have to agree with it and like it and agree with the reasoning behind it to go out there and do that. Kyle Sherman, morning. No, it's good afternoon. Kyle, welcome. Jason Benson, am I losing weight? You have been watching for a while. You know that I'm what my New Year's resolution was. So that's your friendly way of asking how the New Year's resolution is going. Yes, it's going well so far. For you newbies and people who have not been with us the entire time, I told you the first show of January, my New Year's resolution was to average losing 1 pound a week for 52 weeks. I am well on pace to doing that. I lost 8 pounds in January. I meant to give you an update last Friday. So, yes, thank you, Jason, for asking that. As of 2 mornings ago, I was down 8 pounds. But I don't know. This week, I'm eating whatever I can eat and I just, Norman and I were talking about it. I went to the Lambeau Field booth, and they had a brat there. And I'm like, I'm hungry. I haven't eaten today. So I ate a brat. It is what it is. That's what they had to eat. Whatever. Rocky's saying, where has Jerry been? Did he disappear? Or was he banned from the show? No one has been banned from the show. Well, I can't say no one. But no one that has been here more than once has been banned from the show. Let's just say that. I don't know where he is. Jerry just kind of shows up when he wants to. So we'll see. Yes, S. Callie. Insane the people. UBN's here. He'll be on the show Friday making his picks with us. Radio Row making me look thinner. Man, that's 2. I'm looking thinners in a short period of time. I don't know. All right. I want to go back before Adam is in the green room, but real quickly I want to show you something before we go on because I will forget. I want to show you the crowd from last night and the crowd from 2002, which is the last time that I covered this event, okay? I have never covered the game itself before because I've either always been working on the copy desk at the time or I was in news the last time the Super Bowl was here in 2014 or whenever it was, the last time that it was here. I was actually working in news at the time. I went to news, different pieces of my career. But the last time I covered Media Day, which is now known as opening night, was Super Bowl 36, and that was 23 years ago. So here's last night. This was me trying to walk when I realized I shouldn't have come all the way to the end of the road here. It was way too far. But so now I'm going to turn around and walk back. And when I walked back, I saw this and had no idea that this was what behind me. I'm not kidding when I tell you it took me close to half an hour to walk, 120 yards? Now, here's the difference. Here was Super Bowl 2002. This picture courtesy of our archives here at the Times-Picayune. This is what it looked like from above. You think there's any difference between 2025 and 2002? This was the scene. Obviously, no fans. The field looks completely different. It was like that spongy, old artificial turf. There is actually walking space. And then I thought this picture is one of my favorites, okay? When I was going through the archives, I saw this one. Here's a picture of how close you could get to Drew Bledsoe. And the funny part of this picture, if you look in the back and see Tom Brady, is that Drew Bledsoe was who people wanted to talk to, even though Tom Brady was starring in the game. He was starting the game, but everyone wanted to talk to Drew Bledsoe. No one cared about Tom Brady yet. And I'm trying to see what's on his hat, visor. I think it says Super Bowl, but isn't that crazy? Shows you how far we have come in the Super Bowl era. Talking about how far we have come. Adam Chernoff knows how far we have come in the Super Bowl era. First of all, how are you doing in Southwest Canada, right?
You got it right. I'm doing well. The weather up this way is nowhere near like what you have currently at the moment during a busy week for you. Those great pictures looking back on it. I got asked though, like tech wise in 2002, what were the differences now and then? Obviously we're streaming, but like what were you doing down there in 2002?
I can tell you I could not do what I'm doing right now in 2002. What I was doing was writing notes on a notepad. I wasn't even using a tape recorder back then. I was writing down notes. I don't remember the last time I wrote down a note, except even when I write a note to myself, Adam, I do it on this.
I know. I'm with you. Do you miss the turf though? I feel like
Not at all.
The turf was a fun visual on TV back then.
The only thing I'll say about the turf is it was better for my back when you get to be this age. And I don't know if you heard me talking about it being in the process of a diet and trying to lose weight. But when you stand all day at my age, and I would imagine even for someone in decent shape, your back starts to hurt. And that turf, I don't know how they do it because that turf is not good for the back. The spongy turf was way better for the back. That I do remember. Maybe it was because I was in my 30s too. I don't know. But
could have been
interesting. Now, what's the biggest difference? Now, you obviously are younger, so you weren't in the betting scene probably in 2002 yet, were you?
I started 2007.
Okay. So what's the biggest difference for you from 2007 to today?
Availability and options. I think back 17, 18 years now, props came out basically this week, 5-6 days before the game. And for the most part, if you had a menu of 100 props for the game, that was a big offering. That was a big availability at certain sites. Lots of sports books didn't even have that big of a depth. And now you're looking at spots that have 50 different props on single players, never mind the entire menu as a whole. So absolutely just how many different ways you can bet on a game and how many different options there are to bet.
It's great. Real quick, I got to show this comment. Kyle Sherman, you're asking me, did Grunge take that shot, meaning David Grunfeld? And yes, he did. And you have one great eye, my friend, because David Grunfeld did take that photo back in 2002. All right, Adam, first of all, before we get into today's betting market, tell us a little bit about what's going on with you and where people can find you and what's going on.
Honestly, everything's winding down. I know it's a big week for everybody, but we start betting. We bet full time. So in August 1st this year was the Hall of Fame game. So we've been going full steam every day since. So winding down now, but a lot of my off-season content will begin on Apple and Spotify in a couple of weeks, and that's over at the Simple Handicap on both of the channels, and then raspicks.com for all of the bets that we have, which will obviously be pretty quiet for football for a few months now.
But they can go see what you got going on right now for Super Bowl.
Absolutely. Yep. It's a quieter week betting wise in terms of how we approach things, just because everybody's watching the game, obviously. And so there's obviously a ton of money bet into it. And that's typically spots we look to avoid a little bit. When you're doing it at the pro level, it's kind of a misconception that this is a big betting week. It can be for props for some people, but in terms of finding an edge, very difficult to do so.
Let's talk about this game in particular. And I found it interesting that the line hasn't moved all that much since it came out. Adam, it came out, I believe, at -2. It quickly went to -1, and it's kind of settled at -1, 1.5, and that was within 12 hours of it coming out. And I haven't seen movement hardly at all, either with the spread or the total. Do you find this surprising? Because to me, it's a little bit different than last year.
Not a lot, because we know really what both of these two teams are. And just to my last comment where I'm saying it's very difficult to bet on the Super Bowl side or total. You're kind of explaining exactly why. You have a line that's published that's really mirrored at every sports book around the world, and you're not going to get a whole lot of differences from that. And so I think we see a little bit of Eagles money come in over the next couple of days. Maybe we see this trend a little bit towards pick'em, but we're pretty well locked in with both the side and the total right now.
So you don't expect a whole lot of movement like the day of game or, the morning of. Sometimes on Saturday night you'll see some things. You don't expect much movement even within 12 to 18 hours of the game.
Not a lot. I think we'll see the Eagles take money. I think we'll see this number trend towards pick'em, and I think we could see the total anywhere that has 49 currently. That could trend down a little bit as we get closer to game time. But I don't expect big movement here on either the side of the total.
Interesting. You think that it could trend down? I always think that when the betting public gets involved, and a lot of times they do that day before the game or a day of the game, they never want to bet an under. But you don't think that the public maybe wanting to bet over would change it or make it trend up?
Sometimes it can during Super Bowl weeks, just because so many people are obviously betting on the game and having their say. And so you do have just an overwhelming volume that can do that. But I think if we're going to see some respected money come in that has a lot of influence on this number, it would most likely be on the under at this point. And then I think the same would be true for the Eagles side at 1.5.
Okay, interesting here. My question is, for the past 2 years or so, I've been talking about it. I always say, don't bet against God. And I haven't. And you talk about Patrick Mahomes. Is this the year where maybe the trends and the way you've seen how well Saquon has played, and is this a year that maybe you think a little bit differently, and maybe it is a year to bet against God?
It's tough. I mean, the Chiefs have such a knack of winning these games when they matter most, and I don't think it's luck, and I certainly don't think it's referee aided, and I don't think it's a lot of the big talking points that we see on national media as the reason why. I think the big driver behind it is the continuity that this team has had. It's been the same coordinators. It's been the same guys creating the game plan. It's been largely the same key players going through this process over and over again for the past 5 years. They're just so much more well prepared in these games than we're seeing their opponents. And even that game 2 weeks ago now against the Bills, think about the contrast in that game, Jim. I mean, the Bills went to the same QB sneak every single time with Allen that the Chiefs knew were coming and were prepared for it. The Chiefs rookie receiver had a big game while the Bills rookie receiver did not. The defense for Kansas City got the key stops when they needed. The Bills didn't. It's just this extra level that the Chiefs have, and I think it comes from 5 years now of playing in these games with largely the same staff. It makes a big difference.
Jim Derry here with betting handicapper expert extraordinaire Adam Chernoff here on the Dattitude podcast on this Tuesday afternoon, a special Tuesday edition of the Dattitude podcast presented by Evangeline Securities. Adam, we had a talk yesterday about the effect of Steve Spagnuolo, and I think that if you could give him some truth serum and ask him who he would rather play in the AFC Championship game, I think you got the matchup that he wanted. A, he knows Buffalo a little bit better. B, it's a lot easier, in my opinion, to concentrate on Josh Allen than to concentrate on Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry and where the ball is going to move to. And to me, that's why going into this game, maybe, and I'm not making a prediction yet. I'll do that on Friday's show, but I will say that
holding it till the end. I understand.
A similar kind of matchup. You talk about Baltimore is the number 1 rushing team in the NFL. Philadelphia was a close number 2. And because of Saquon's effectiveness and because Jalen Hurts, who I don't think is as hurt as they wanted to lead on, I think it's a similar kind of thing. And so it's going to be tougher for Spags to be able to figure out where to go and what the options are when trying to run the foot. We're trying to figure out who to guard against when they run the football.
Well, he has to choose what he wants to take away. I think the big thing we're going to see is an overcommitment to stop the run. And my question is, what version of the Chiefs' run defense are we getting? It was a big surprise to me in the first about 11, 12 weeks of the season. They were a top 5 run defense. in the second half of the season, like Jim, they fell off of a cliff, and it's not been against elite run offenses that they faced. You think about the Texans O-line and how many injuries they had. They gave up 2 big games to Mixon in the Texans run game. They gave up big games to the Steelers run game. There's been some teams down the stretch that have really had difficulty running the football all year that have had big games against Kansas City. And so the Chiefs are going to have to overcommit to stop the run. I believe that's priority number 1 for the defense. It's kind of the obvious statement. The big thing is going to be, how do they handle things outside against these wide receivers? That, to me, is where this game is going to be won and lost.
And we can get into player props if you want to, but I think one player prop that I know that I like is Jalen Hurts over rushing yardage. And I'm not even exactly sure what it is at the moment, but I think that they're going to count on him to run the ball, because obviously the first key in what you were talking about and not knowing exactly where to go, I think they're going to key on Saquon first, obviously, as well as they should. But that may open up things for Jalen Hurts, and especially maybe to bust one 25 or 30 yards.
It's interesting, and I hate to go the opposite here of the host. Okay. There's been some very well-respected money on Hurts rushing yards under, and they started playing that number under at 40.5. It is now down to 37.5, and it's trending a little bit lower. Here's the thing. When you think about this matchup and how it's going to look, you have an overcommitment most likely against Barkley in the backfield. But what that's really going to probably force Kansas City into is a bit of a cover 7 look. I'm getting a little technical here, X's and O's, but that is going to really force Kansas City with an extra guy to defend some of the tight ends over the middle, because Philadelphia is going to have to utilize either most likely Goddard, their much better run blocking tight end. You're going to have an extra guy on that side to kind of attack Kansas City if they bring extra guys into the box. And it's just not a lot of friendly run looks for Jalen Hurts, because you're not going to have these extra blitzers burning off of the edge and having those big spaces and those big holes for Hurts to run into. And so there's been a bit of a difference of opinion on how that's going to look. If you're taking away Barkley and how Kansas City is going to approach it, you're probably taking away a lot of those favorable run looks for Hurts, and it's likely going to force him into needing to have a big game passing outside for the Eagles to be competitive.
Is this actually something you're going to play? Are you playing the Hurts under?
I have a laundry list of options that I have already played. I don't know how deep you want to get into them, but we can start talking matchups if you want to.
As deep as you want to get. We got at least 7-8 minutes here, and I know you got 2 or 3 that you would definitely want to talk about, maybe another one.
I'll throw a handful at you. So let's start with 2 tackle props. Tackle props are something that you cannot really bet during the regular season just because they're not really available. Lots of sports books don't post them. When you get into the Super Bowl, it's wide open. You get tackle props for everybody. So 1 on each side. Zach Bond over 9.5 tackles and assists.
Fans, Adam. That hurts.
I saved it for the show specifically. He's going to be everywhere in this game. The Chiefs have to go to the middle of the field, and we're going to see them, whether it's tight ends, whether it's Hunt out of the backfield, whether it's a run game attempted to be established, or it's those slot wide receiver looks. Everything about Kansas City and their main attack point on offense is going to be over the middle of the field. And so this is such a Bond game in terms of opportunities that he is going to get. He's at 9.5 tackles. That matches his season high, but I don't think it's high enough. So that's prop 1. And Jim, I'll give you one more on the other side quickly. Leo Chenal at over 2.5. Chenal is their best run-stopping linebacker, and they use him at times on the defensive line. As I'm talking about that tight end matchup and blocking against tight ends, we saw last year against the 49ers, who run from a lot of condensed sets, have really tight formations where that heavier personnel, 2 tight ends, 2 backs look. Philadelphia runs a lot of looks with 2 tight ends on the field. That's going to bring Chenal onto the field for Kansas City more often. This is a good example of how you get into the Super Bowl. Chenal was seldom, if ever, lined at sportsbooks for tackles during the regular season. But now in this matchup specifically, sportsbooks post a number on him, and 2.5 tackles and assists is just too low. So both of those guys for tackle props stand out.
I just can't express enough how that Zach Bond prop hurts the feeling of people who live here in New Orleans. That is such a sore subject that they never should have let him go. But
Well, you know what else probably hurts Saints fans is seeing 156 tackles this season
yeah,
in the middle of that defense.
yeah,
Another thing too, Jim. Obviously, Nakobe Dean got hurt a couple of weeks ago, so
right.
there's kind of a void in the middle of that linebacker group for Philly, which is why I think the Chiefs attack it a little bit more. And so it's his opportunity to really command the middle of this field in this Super Bowl.
A couple, I guess 3 years ago now, you gave us it's one of my favorite prop bets ever. You were talking about Johnny Hecker and why he was going to have the longest punt and really digging in the weeds. Do you have, I mean, tackles are in the weeds enough, but do you have any kind of like really in the weeds bet like that that we can go with this Sunday?
No, not yet.
Okay.
We'll see what comes of it, but I'm going to give you an in the weeds player, if you will, just from the fact of probably very few people are thinking about or talking about him, and his price reflects that. So we can get, you want to go weird with the player prop?
Absolutely.
So Dotson over 1.5 receiving yards for the Eagles. He is going to be wide receiver number 3. Quietly in this last couple of 1.5 receiving yards. This Eagles offense is Barkley, Brown, Smith, and Goddard. And they really haven't had a need to go beyond that because in the last 3 months, we've seen them playing with these massive leads that they just sit on.
Right.
This game, it's priced at 1.5 for the point spread. It's a Super Bowl. It's going to be competitive. I think there's a good chance we see the Eagles trailing, something that they really haven't found themselves in a deficit that often early in games the last few weeks down the stretch. Dotson's been on the field, Jim, for 60+% of snaps the last couple of weeks, but he's just never needed to be targeted because the Eagles have been so comfortable with what they're doing. As we talked about, Chiefs are going to sell up to stop the run. That's coming. You're going to have Chris Jones on Becton up front. That's a big matchup for the Chiefs. That's going to force the Eagles needing to change things up a little bit, looking outside, throwing outside the numbers, a spot where the Chiefs defense has been very vulnerable. If you have McDuffie on Brown and you have Watson on Smith and you're dedicating more resources over the middle to Goddard, Dotson's that guy that's going to be open. You need a catch and a fall forward for this one at 1.5 yards. I think it's going to happen. I think Dotson over 1.5 yards is a prop to look at.
One thing I love about Adam here, and this is what I told you before he even came on, he goes in depth of why he likes things. He doesn't just tell you, I like Joe Blow to catch 2 passes and say for 10 seconds why. He gives you an in-depth reason, and that's why you're one of my favorite guests when it comes to handicapping, Adam. Before I ask you for your prediction in the game, I want to ask you, what do you think of the Saints situation, and how far, as a handicapper, you dig into X's and O's? That's a major part of your handicapping is diving into X's and O's. What do you think of Kellen Moore if he does become the Saints coach, and how much do you think that would change this football team?
Not a lot. I think that's a bit of an. I was surprised they didn't go McCarthy. Honestly, with those ties there, I thought that was going to be the path that they would pursue.
So did I.
Here's my kind of take on the league right now and how I see things from the professional betting side. I am starting to value second or repeat time head coaches after a little bit of time off coming back to take over a role more than I am valuing the new, hot, young offensive coordinator. I think Dan Quinn this season was a really good example. Cliff Kingsbury getting back to being an OC, I think was a good example. We're seeing it start to really show up. And a team like the Saints, where it's not going to necessarily require a full offensive overhaul. There's decent pieces on defense. I think the Saints need more of an adult in the room that is different from this past regime that they've been stuck in for 2 decades, just to kind of settle everything down and establish a bit of an offensive and a defensive culture going forward that's different from the last 2 decades. I don't think the Saints pieces and what they have necessarily fit a young first-time head coach stepping in and taking things forward. I don't know if I agree with the direction of going to Moore. That could maybe set things back again for the next couple of years.
And I don't necessarily disagree with you. In fact, I agree with you more than I disagree with you. But some people listening may say that isn't that what the Saints had in Dennis Allen, and it didn't necessarily work out.
No, because he was there forever, and it's just there needs to be this detachment from these past 2 decades. I know it was great at times. It's got to go a different direction, and it needs a bit of a reset and a bit of a restart. I don't think a young guy like Kellen Moore, as a first timer coming in, is necessarily going to have the experience and the direction to navigate that as it should. I would much prefer, if I'm a Saints fan, to get the experienced head coach that's had a year or two away that can come in and just kind of settle things and start building rather than taking that chance. I know there might be a lot of Saints fans listening that just want that fresh and different approach just because it's been the same way for 20 years now in the city. I think that would be more detrimental than not.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you again, but one thing I do like is one thing that I wanted you to talk about a clean break, and one thing that I thought was important for this franchise, I'm going to get into it later this afternoon as well, and we've been talking about it for a couple weeks now, is that I wanted someone that didn't have anything to do with the Saints ever, someone who doesn't even have black and gold in his closet, never played for the Saints, never coached for the Saints, and Kellen Moore, and I'm not saying that's the only reason why I wanted Kellen Moore, but he did check some of the other guidelines per se, but when McCarthy became available, I thought they were going to go that way, and I actually was advocating for them to go that way because it had been, you talk about a clean break, it's been, 20, almost 20 years since Mike McCarthy was in this building. So I think that, the fact that he'd been going 20 years, you might as well say he hadn't been here.
Well, here's what I think what would have been great is if you had McCarthy head coach and you keep Kubiak. I don't know what the sentiment in the city necessarily is for Kubiak overall, but we talked about it in the preseason when we were going back and forth and that hire was made. With Derek Carr, with these running backs, with the O-line when it's healthy, and if you could have added a receiver, I think this year for the Saints was so disguised by all these injuries and what they had to go through. When all those pieces are healthy with the Kubiak offensive system, it is such a great match. And now you're rebuilding from nothing with him going to Seattle. There were so many great pieces to make that system work. You saw it in weeks 1 and 2, albeit probably an unrealistic standard to maintain and to hold. It just seems like a big reversal now for what the Saints have to figure out.
I hear you, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but and as far as Kubiak, I think most fans were in his corner, but at the same time, not as much as at the beginning of the season. I guess the way to put it.
It's hard to go through multiple QB injuries and wide receiver injuries, and I mean you have wide receiver 5 running the top amount of routes for you in the last couple of weeks. It's no coordinator is going to look that great there.
Wide receiver 9, 10, and 11 too. Before we let you go here, about 2 more minutes. This will lead me into getting your pick for the game or whatever you want to talk about as far as your thoughts for the game. Uncle Big Nick asked, Scotty to win Waste Management and the Eagles to win the Super Bowl parlay. Your thoughts?
Man, that's reaching. That's reaching there to get both the winner of the golf tournament and the Super Bowl parlay together, Nick. It's going to be a fun weekend. I like his idea. You're watching the final few holes leading right into the Super Bowl festivities. I like the idea there, but I don't think I can get on board with a PGA Tour winner combined into a Super Bowl side winner as a great bet to make.
Yeah, that's tough. But look, Scotty's been really good at the waste management, and actually his first big win came there the same day that the Rams won the Super Bowl. All right, what are your thoughts? Whatever you want to tell us. I don't know if you want to give us your full prediction or whatever. Chiefs, Eagles, are you taking a side?
I'm not, but the scoreline I have predicted is a 24-23 Eagles win, 1-point win. Conviction on this, Jim, relative to some of the props we talked about, very, very low. This is a true coin flip game in every sense of the word. I think it comes down to a late fourth quarter drive, and there's not a lot you can look at. I know it's disappointing to come on the radio saying and not have
Not
a
at
lot,
all.
but the reality is we're betting these games professionally. That's how we make our living, and you get to the Super Bowl, and there's not a lot of wiggle room when you're looking at trying to find a big opportunity. So I think it's a 1-point Eagles win in a very tight game that'll fall right in that high 40s range.
One thing we always talk about on this show, and we talked about on Bayou Bets before that you came on that back in the day, was if you don't like a side, we're going to tell you we don't like a side. Just because it's out there doesn't mean you have to bet it. And it is disappointing if you don't like a side. And I'm not going to make my prediction yet, but if you're not, there are other things to bet besides the spread or the total, and you've talked about them here. That's why handicappers make money.
Can we make up for it with a couple more props for everybody listening?
Absolutely.
All right, I'll rattle off a few. Saquon Barkley, longest rush in the game, under 25.5 yards. Again, it's going to be a sellout for the Chiefs against this run. The Chiefs' run defense overall, even in the struggles they had the second half of the season, not conceding a lot of explosives as is. So Barkley, under 25.5 long rush. Patrick Mahomes, under 6.5 rush attempts. Very popular prop is his rushing yards over, his rush attempts over. This is a pure fade of the number for me. It's his highest number he's ever had on a rush attempts prop in any game he has played in his entire career. I see that in a game like this. I'm happy to just fade that and play the opposite at 6.5. So that's an under. And then we talked about the Hurts rush yards under. Another one that I would have to round this one out. Juju Smith-Schuster over 14.5 receiving yards. Wide receiver number 3 for the Chiefs. I think he's going to be included in the bigger play downfield. So that number is a little bit low for what we've seen Juju at times this year.
Adam, thank you so much for taking time out. I know you're ready to wind down. What are you going to do for vacation?
Well, we bought a house, wife and I. So it is a cross-country move in the dead of winter in some of the harshest conditions imaginable coming up in about 3 weeks. So no vacation this year, no time away, but we are spending some time moving into a new place. So it's a bit of a
country. You mean how far away from where do you live now?
It'll be about a 1,600-mile move.
Wow.
And we were looking around. Moving companies have just got out of control. So my dad's a retired farmer. He's coming out to help us with the drive. We're navigating. If anyone's seen the TV show Highway Through Hell, we're driving through that highway in the dead of winter. So we'll see how he navigates it, packing up the dog and the trucks and the furniture, and we'll see what happens. So
I'm going to check on you in a couple of weeks and make sure everything's okay.
I might make an episode at this rate.
Well, good luck with that, Adam, and thank you so much for joining us from Southwest Canada. I guess next time we talk, you'll be in where I'm south.
Dead center of the country, in the prairies. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll be looking forward to. Good luck with that. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jim. Chat soon.
Adam Chernoff, everyone. Look, I'm not kidding. He is the best handicapper in the business, and there's a reason why I have him on. Again, if you don't like a side, don't play a side. And so he's telling you, in his opinion, I'm not telling you not to go bet something if you don't like something, but be careful with it. But even if you don't bet, tells you what he thinks. All right, we're about to bring in Matt Moscona here, but before we do, we told you earlier we would let you know. No, actually, you know what? I didn't tell you earlier, so let me go. Man, it's been that kind of day. If y'all knew what happened right before we went on the air, you'd understand maybe a little bit. Before we get to the rest of the show and Matt Moscona, let me tell you about our friends at Evangeline Securities. Of course, they're a company that can help you decide if it's the right time to sell your family-run business or a privately held business. And just as importantly, they can help you figure out what that business is worth. If that is you or someone you know, it's time to reach out to Evangeline's founding and managing partners, Nick Braden and Ron Hemelt, both native New Orleanians. They will start by scheduling a complimentary evaluation from their offices either on Poydras Street or in Lafayette. And from there, you will be well-informed and begin to make the decision on if you want to proceed. The best part about Evangeline, they are media circus free. Although you might want to wait and schedule your evaluation for next week because right now you can't even drive down Poydras Street. The Super Bowl, the traffic, the shutoffs, the security. It is what it is. So, but back to Evangeline Securities. what's up? If you were ready to proceed, what do you do next? We'll fill you in more later in the show. In the meantime, you can check them out at www.evangelinesecurities.com. Norman, Matt can come in whenever he wants. We're ready. And you're talking about, we're about to bring in Matt Moscona. He's going to sit next to me here. He's chatting with Sharif Ashak over there. By the way, welcome, Hakeem. I saw your text earlier, and you were right. The game is most certainly evolving. Minnesota, Houston, Green Bay, Rams, Philadelphia. Youth does matter these days. And Mr. Bell is going to change the camera angle, and there we go. How are you, sir?
Hey, Jim.
Welcome here on Media Row. I know you got a lot going on these days.
No, not really, actually.
Really?
No, I'm just hanging out.
Okay, well, I saw the morning. You were home this morning doing the morning scone for the, I don't know, tell me the number. I don't know.
I think today was 2,567. I think it was 2,567 today.
Okay, for those of you who don't know, besides the fact that Matt, ESPN Baton Rouge, he has been doing his podcast consecutively. It's got to be in the Guinness. We got to call Guinness. It's got to be the record.
It might be.
It's got to be the record. 2,567 straight days, sickness, hangovers, vacation.
Oh, yeah. Airports,
hotels,
cars.
Sick kids. Doesn't make a difference.
My favorite was pre-op before my knee surgery.
Wow.
Like 5 a.m. pre-op.
Doesn't matter. Matt Moscona is doing the morning scone, and I watched this morning. I know there was it was all over the place this morning. We're talking a little bit about everything. Never talked about the whole Greg Brooks situation.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we're talking about that, and it breaks my heart with that.
That's devastating on so many levels. And what I hope, and listen, Jim, there's two sides to every story, and I'd look forward to hearing what LSU's side is in totality. But the thing that's inarguable is LSU has got to give that young man and that family every resource imaginable to allow him to be whatever the best version of himself will be for like that. No one can argue to the contrary, right? Like negligence, liability, all those things, courts can figure that stuff out, and everyone has their day in court. But no matter what, they have to do right by him to make sure he has every resource possible to get as healthy, as close to normal as he can be again.
And for those who don't know what we're talking about, basically LSU is kind of let Greg Brooks by the wayside is the only way that I know how to explain it, or at least that's the way some people interpret it. Maybe you can interpret it a little bit better than that.
I don't want to.
He had his first interview yesterday, I believe, right?
With Good Morning America.
With Good Morning America, and was on national TV.
I don't know that we necessarily learned anything new in the interview, Jim. I mean, because the Good Morning America cited the lawsuit, which was already public. Right. So a lot of that verbiage we already knew. It was the first time that I think people saw and heard from Greg Brooks, and having had several strokes on the operating table when he was going into surgery for the brain tumor, his speech is his speech is impaired. You could tell he's lost a tremendous amount of weight. It's jarring to see a guy who just 16 months ago was a healthy major college football player. But as far as accusations of negligence or all of that, all of that will play itself out in court. I just don't have an opinion. I mean, there's nothing. I
wasn't even really asking your opinion. I was just talking about it as a sad situation.
It's devastating.
Look, he's a fellow West Banker. I'm from the West Bank. He went to West Jefferson. I went to Shaw. I've always kind of followed his career.
Sure.
I covered prep for a long time, and just a fantastic football player, and really, it was a great kid. When I was covering high school sports, so it's just sad to see it for anyone.
Man.
So anyway, we're praying and wishing the best for him. I'll probably end this segment with a little bit of LSU talk, but I want to get into Saints because, one of the main reasons why I want to have you on is you have been one of the most vocal people when it comes to, and look, this show's called Dattitude for a reason. We have Dattitude here. So
I love it.
You have been one of the most outspoken people when talking about this whole process and where this franchise has become, not even just this coaching search, but how, I guess, disappointed, maybe the best word to say, of where we have come here in January or February of 2025, and things have devolved to a certain point.
Yeah, and I think the frustrating part for most people is the decision makers don't seem. Almost everyone who looks at this franchise seems to be zigging, and the decision makers are this small group of people who are wanting to zag,
Right.
and that's what's perplexing. And Jim, like I'm not approaching this with a hindsight 2020 viewpoint. When the New Orleans Saints were in this perpetual win now mode at the end of Drew Brees' career, I was good with it. I was good with restructuring the contracts and trading up in the draft because you were knowingly mortgaging your future to try to win another one with Drew.
Right.
I was good with it. I was good with it then. I'm still good with it. It didn't work. They got close. They got Nola no called.
Understood why.
But I knew what they were doing. It's no different than what Denver did with Peyton Manning. And Denver went 10 years without making the playoffs after Peyton Manning. They just made the playoffs this year for the first
We're
time
5 years into this.
in a decade, right? So, but they got to 2 Super Bowls and won one of them. So it's easier, I think, for Denver fans to stomach what's
Right.
happened. I'm not saying it's easy, it's easier. The problem with the Saints right now is it's over. Like, you are not close to winning. You have the worst cap situation in the NFL. You do not have a premier draft pick to take a quarterback. You're not a desirable job as your top 2 candidates. One took another job. One decided to stay where he is as a coordinator. Like, you're not winning. You're not close to winning. So do you run it back? You have the 4th oldest roster in the NFL this year. Like, at some point, you have to acknowledge you are not close. Accept that, and this fan base loves the team. Like,
Yes.
they are going to be there. Like the Who Dat Nation is just going to run away and stop caring about the Saints. Like,
No, they come on here
my
and
God.
they come
Like-
on here and tell me how much they hate where they are right now every day.
yes, like this conversation, your audience is proof of that. People care desperately, even though this team is face down in the dirt right now. But like, at some point, you've got to be willing to acknowledge what you are and be willing to take 2 steps back to take 10 steps forward. And they just don't seem to be willing to do that, which is the frustrating part.
Jim Derry here with Matt Moscona on this special Tuesday edition live from Radio Row, day 2 here in the Convention Center in New Orleans. It is much crazier here today than it was yesterday.
You got
this
that
game
right.
presented to you, today's show, as always, presented to you by Evangeline Securities. Matt, I am not used to being in the role of being the positive one when looking at aside from the Saints, because I have been called Derry Downer for a reason.
I love it.
Okay, so but I'm
Derry
gonna
Downer is so good.
I'm gonna pose this side to you, okay? I'm gonna pose this side to you today and see if you can at least see this.
Okay.
Okay. The whole coaching search thing, and I know it goes way beyond the coaching search. It's not just the coaching search
Okay.
and the problems that we have, but. All right, so Aaron Glenn, they had their sights set on Aaron Glenn. I think everyone realizes that unquestionably. I don't think anyone would have had a problem with it. Even the people that were, I don't know, would have been okay with it. I mean, I think Aaron Glenn would have been a great choice. I think
Sure.
he's going to do fine with the Jets.
Oh, with
When
the
that-
Jets? Oh, man.
Yeah,
Woo!
that's a different story.
Woo! Okay.
But we could see, I think anyone could see as well why he would take the Jets. He's probably bleeds green and white. That's where he played most of his career. He actually coached there for a little while as well. It's understandable. And I think the Saints were thrown for a loop because their ego is about the size of this convention center. They just assumed because they wanted Aaron Glenn, they were going to get Aaron Glenn.
Yep.
And so then, thrown for a loop, they weren't sure whether they wanted Mike McCarthy. Maybe they were playing chicken with Mike McCarthy and didn't get him. Maybe they really wanted Kellen Moore. Who knows? But I think that they're okay with Kellen Moore. They're going to spin it to where that was their choice all along. But I think that they're really okay with Kellen Moore, and I think that he could come in and make some changes, some positive changes. He checks off the boxes of a young guy, an offensive-minded guy. He's never coached here before. I think he could breathe life into this organization. So all these things that I think Kellen Moore can do, I think achieves what, in the end, what the Saints were trying to do in the long run.
I'll add on to your comment to say, and in that end, here is a path to success. It was Cincinnati. Cincinnati moved on from Andy Dalton.
Right.
They went belly up. They hired Zach Taylor. They tank,
Yes.
and they got Joe Burrow.
Right.
And the first year they won 4 games, and somebody blew up his knee. But the next year they were in the Super Bowl. right? And they've been a contender since. But what you needed was the willingness to tank or to say, we know we're not going to be good. So you can bring Kellen Moore in, understanding, look, you bring Derek Carr back, you run it back with all the same old players. Maybe you win 7-8 games, maybe. But where are you? You're in the same situation that you're in. You're drafting somewhere in the low teens. You still don't have a franchise quarterback. You're probably moving on from Derek Carr after 2025. Like, it's still, I'm with you on Kellen Moore. Can it work? Sure. I love the idea of a young offensive-minded coach. NFL's a copycat league. I love that. I'm down with that. Moore wouldn't have been my first choice, but I'm okay with what you just framed conceptually. What it can't work, Jim, with what you have right now. Like, you can go get a great chef, but, like, you got to have good ingredients. Otherwise, like, it ain't going to taste very good. Like, he can only do so much. So you still have got to be willing. You have got to be willing to take that step back and understand you're going to be bad. So if they bring Kellen Moore in and say, listen, we're going to cut Derek Carr, we're going to save the cap hit, we know you're going to be bad year one, but we're going to be patient with you, which is a credit to the Saints organization. They have been patient. Like, they do value stability and continuity.
To a fault.
Yes, that's the problem. But they can go to a coach and say, we are going to be patient with you, look. And I think that's what they'll need to do.
Well, I'm not going to be a hypocrite because I have said forever on this show that I am never for tanking because losing only makes you a loser. I mean, but there are ways to say, look, if we're going to go forward, we're willing to take risks, risks that maybe we wouldn't normally take. And if they work, they work. If they don't, they don't. And with that, I'll say, and I've said this yesterday, I didn't think I would ever say this, but I'm opening up to, while I think the Saints need the most help in the trenches, if Jackson Dart keeps shooting up the trajectory that he's shooting up, I'm not saying that's what I would wish for the Saints to do, but I am opening up to the possibility of maybe that is the way to go. What do you think about that?
In round one?
I mean, that's where he's going to be. It's going to be around. Now, again, I'm an in the trenches guy. I've been saying the Saints need to fix the trenches before they get a quarterback. But if this maybe is the guy, do you see Jackson Dart being a franchise-changing kind of quarterback? Because that's what they're going to need.
If the Saints go through the entire pre-draft process and all pro day, combine, everything, and Jackson Dart has a first-round grade and they want to take him, great. I think the Saints, like, I'm not bullish on it. On any quarterback really in this draft, I think Shedeur Sanders is the best guy in this class. Mm-hmm. That's who I would take if I had to take a quarterback. And
he'll probably be gone.
He'll be gone. No, he'll be gone. But I think the Saints, if you're not going to be willing to use a high first-round pick or trade up to be aggressive to go get the guy at the top of the draft, then you have to take one every year. And until you hit on your Russ in round 3, Dak in round 4, Cousins in round 5, Brady, Purdy. Like, you can find starters later in the draft, but you got to be willing to spend the draft capital.
Purdy is to me complete luck. Okay, I think complete luck that the Niners found him, and I'm okay with later when you say like second, third round. But I don't know that you can realistically find. You got to get super lucky if you find a starter after round 5. Now, I'm guessing we're probably going to feel different because I've never asked you this, and I don't know that I've heard you talk about this. I'm sure you have, but I just haven't heard you talk about it. I am of the ilk that I don't think Spencer Rattler is ever going to be a starting quarterback in this league. I don't need to see more than the 7 games that I've saw him play in this year. That's my opinion. However, a Kellen Moore may feel differently in the way you're talking by going that route. Again, I would completely disagree with that's the way, but I could understand why someone would want to go that route. By going that route, you give someone like that a chance, and that's a creative way of tanking, I guess.
You're talking about cutting Derek Carr and
if you cut Derek Carr.
So that's what I wish they would do this year. Like, get your cap right, save the $30 million this year by cutting Derek Carr. You minimize that hit over the next couple of years, and now you get an opportunity to see Rattler Hayner with an actual offense. Jim, let's be honest, man. Like,
man, I'd want to poke my eyes out, man.
I'm with you. But we also saw Spencer Rattler play with a makeshift offensive line, no Alvin Kamara, no Chris Olave, no Rashid Shaheed, no Taysom Hill for the last month of the season. Like, what are we really judging?
But
he was a preseason offense, man.
You've been around this game for a long time, and you've watched this game for a long time. And I think you would agree, because I know you know football, that watching him, it was almost as if three things were going to happen 80% of the time. He was going to throw it to his first read, he was going to get sacked, or he was going to turn the ball over, most likely throw it to his first read.
Isn't that what happens in most plays anyway?
I don't think so. I mean, well, it didn't for, and I hate comparing everyone to number 9, but that certainly wasn't the case for number 9.
Oh, so
Okay?
wait. So you mean Spencer Rattler as a rookie with a preseason offense isn't Drew Brees? Come on. I mean, like, I'm obviously oversimplifying, but yes, like,
right. And I'm overcomplicating.
I'm not going to judge Spencer Rattler based on what we saw. I'll tell you, there were things that I really liked. The first game against Tampa, that second quarter, you're like, okay.
Against Washington, and when he came in, when they just threw him to the Wolves, and I think, like, there was no preparation, right? I mean, I don't think he thought in his mind he was playing, and they threw him to the Wolves, and he didn't think. It's like the movie, don't think, me, just throw.
Just go.
And he went, and he was fantastic, and I'm like, well, if this is the kid that I thought we were going to get, then I'd be okay with it.
But doesn't that tell you it's in there?
I don't know, man. I don't know if one half of football can tell me that. I guess.
It tells you that physically it's in there. Can it be refined?
Well, we'll say this, and as much as it would be tough to watch, and I'm not for tanking in any shape or fashion. However, if you wanted to be creative and someone said, you know, I think we can make something out of this kid, that would be one creative way, because either you have something, again, I'm not for this, but either you would find out either you have something and you struck gold, or you go through a year and then you're picking late. The problem is, what if the Saints go, and people say, just go 3-14 and draft Arch? I'm like, it's not that easy, because 3-14, you might be picking second.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, you might go through all this, and there's, and Arch is not going to be,
I do think
anyway.
So I don't want to get hung up on the word tanking. Because I think you have to accept that the result may not be good, but how else do you ever find out if Rattler is capable of playing unless if you play him? So that's one. But next year's draft class, I might feel different about this, Jim, if I didn't look at next year's draft class and see Arch and Garrett Nussmeier and Nico Iamaleava and Miller Moss and potentially Lenore Sellers. And, like,
next year could be a lot like this past year was.
A really deep class where you may have 5 guys in the top 10 that are could be. It could be it looks like a much better year to be trying to pick your franchise.
And why next year, if you were 9, you'd be way better off at 9 next year than you're at 9 this year. Some commenters, some questions in the queue. One from our friend Hakeem, who says, let 2025 show you if you need to draft your franchise quarterback in 2026, 27. Wait, hold on. He says also, thanks, Scone, a JV roster and success, supposed follow. Rattler needs full strength, full health up front and weapon. I mean, and that's what a lot of my regular viewers think, that we disagree on a regular basis.
In fairness, though, it's also worth saying Derek Carr didn't have those guys for the bulk of the season either. But my point on Derek Carr is, I've always said, Jim, you go back the day they signed Derek Carr, this is my point. Like, he is Andy Dalton. His career to this point,
I don't disagree with that. I think that's a good comparison.
It actually statistically is almost an identical comparison. Guy that was drafted by a franchise, they made him their franchise. He was there for a decade. They knew what he was. They knew they had a high floor, low ceiling. Right? That's Derek Carr. He is a lower, mid-tier, upper, bottom-tier starting quarterback, but he is still a starting quarterback in the NFL. You're just never going to win anything of significance with him. I'm not good with that.
You know where he stands all time in passing yardage? Which surprised the hell out of me, by the way. It's not top 10 or anything like that,
no, but he's
21st.
Okay, like, that doesn't surprise me, because I mean, he had the one 4,000-yard season with Gruden in Las Vegas when they won 11 games. That was his one playoff. But, like, that was the year he got hurt.
Yeah.
He got hurt and didn't play in the playoff game. Who started for the Raiders in that playoff game?
Wow, I'm drawing a blank. Who did start for the Raiders that playoff game? Because he was hurt. Somebody's going to tell me.
Someone will have it. Anyway, I don't want to get hung up on that.
They got one really long question I'll have to get to after you're here. Wait, Gabe might be telling me who it is. Connor Cook
From Michigan State.
Yeah, Connor Cook. Let me ask you let me give you a hypothetical and see where you, because this goes against like what you're saying going with Derek Carr. Okay, I think first of all, I don't think the Saints are going to do, even if I agreed with you, which I don't, but that's okay. I love having guests that don't agree with me, because I love contrasting opinions. It's why at least half the people in here, that's why we have Mondays where it's just me and the commenters.
Right.
And we do that all the time. But let me ask you this situation, and you tell me what you think. All right, let's say I don't think the Saints are going to do. I think the Saints are going to roll with Carr. I don't think they're going to eat the money. I don't think and I think it's more because of an ego thing than that's what they think they should do. I think they can. I think the front brass, same reason why, they wanted Aaron Glenn. They think they can make Derek Carr a Super Bowl quarterback. I don't agree with that either.
Yeah.
But let's say Derek Carr. Let's say they roll it back with they tell Kellen Moore, finish this year, go with Derek Carr. If it doesn't work out, we'll figure out what to do after this year. It's easier to cut him after this year. He comes in 10-7. I'm not saying that that's even possible. Let's say hypothetically they go 10-7, which would probably be good enough to win this division. It'd certainly be the third year in a row that would be good enough to win the division. Would you feel differently if the Saints went 10-7 next year? They won the division with Derek Carr.
Would I feel differently about Derek Carr?
No. Would you feel differently about the organization's future and how to
because
go forward?
I would view 10-7 the same way as I would. I think
I completely
8, 9, 9,
understand
and 8,
that,
10, and 7, because you have you're going to have games every season that flip or flop. Look, 2 years ago the Green Bay game comes to mind, right? I mean, Groupie misses the kick at the end, or Doinks it, and it's like you make that kick, you're in the playoffs,
right?
I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but it's true.
That's absolutely true.
So like, you could have those, but are you a contender?
Right.
Are you closer to being a contender, not only just to win a bad division, but to win a Super Bowl? I'm not naive. Like, the Saints aren't winning a Super Bowl next year or the year after that, but like, that's what I think every organization's motivation should be. Are we moving toward winning a championship? Because if not, then what are you doing?
I don't disagree with that aspect of it at all. And I will bring even a more recent point, and we talked about this on the show. The Saints, after they go 2-0, Derek Carr leads them to a potential game-winning score. It should have been 3-0. Saquon Barkley still running down Poydras Street.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And then the next game, they hold Atlanta without an offensive touchdown, and they score a late touchdown again, and Atlanta kicks a 59 Younghoe Koo kick. So imagine if that team goes 4-0, we're sitting here talking about something differently, because then Mickey Loomis gets his wish. They don't fire Dennis Allen. I promise you that's what happens.
I agree.
They don't fire Dennis Allen, and we're in a way worse situation here with New Orleans. So, I mean, I hear you. If you don't have something radical happen to a franchise, you're never going to get the change you need in the long run. I understand that part of it.
That radical, either one way or another, or you have to have a little bit of luck. Like, I mean,
you definitely
when you
luck
got
as well.
Drew Brees,
that was a lot of luck.
We all know the story, but like,
a lot of luck.
Miami flunked him on the physical.
That's
like,
a lot of luck.
Otherwise, it's reversed, and you got Dante Culpepper.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I just don't think Derek Carr is that guy. Look, he seems like a great man, husband, father, which is all way more important in life than playing football. So it's nothing personal there. I'd say the same about Dennis Allen.
Yeah.
But like, there's a large enough sample size now to know what Derek Carr is, and maybe more importantly, what he isn't. And he's not a quarterback that's ever going to lead a team to a Super Bowl. So what are you doing?
There are the supporters of your side of the story are all coming out now. My regulars, Corey Terrio saying, cut Carr, let Rattler and Haener battle it out, which is exactly what you said. Bring in a cheap quarterback in free agency. You have 3 quarterbacks on the roster. Get your cap right. Start a rebuild. And then
1-year deal with Garoppolo, Jacoby Brissett, someone like that.
Justin Fields, if he's available.
So you have a veteran, and then you're leaning on your young guys too.
Although if they were to sign Justin Fields to something like that, they cut Carr, sign Justin Fields is going to be the star. Would be certainly better than any of those. And then Uncle Big Nick, our friend who comes on all the time, he wants to know what you thought of Rattler when he was playing in college. You're a big college football guy. You're obviously a huge SEC guy. What did you think of Spencer Rattler in college at South Carolina?
He was a guy. Well, it started at Oklahoma.
Right.
I mean, he was the guy that was supposed to be the number 1
Behind
pick.
Jalen Hurts, right?
And he ended up losing his job to Caleb Williams.
Right.
And so that's when ultimately he transferred to South Carolina. And that year, 2 seasons ago, he was awesome, especially late. South Carolina in 2023 was just not a very good football team. They were what they were because
They did have Leggett.
Yeah, he Spencer Rattler. You're right about Xavier Leggett, but Spencer Rattler elevated that program to a point where they were even in bowl contention, where they wouldn't have been close without him. He was a fantastic college football player. He just ran up against a guy that ended up being the future Heisman winner, #1 pick, and lost his job and so transferred.
My biggest problem with Rattler, and again, some shows end up devolving into Rattler talk, and I don't necessarily want to do that here, but I will say this. Here's my thing about Rattler, not necessarily just from the 6.5 games that we saw him play for the Saints, but back in college too. He does things on the field at times, and I said this yesterday. He probably made 4 or 5 throws this year where I said, wow,
Yes.
there's no one else that can do that. But then there were other things that, like, what is he doing? But he did in college. So it's the inconsistency. And I also saw that in college where he made some plays that made him look like a Heisman Trophy winner, but also in college things that no other top 5, top 6, top 7 kind of quarterback would do. Maybe that's why he got drafted in the 5th round. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's certainly part of it. But I would also say, man, I'm going to go back to the thing kind of where we started this conversation, Jim, which is
It's harsh. I get it.
so he's a rookie in the NFL. Like,
I understand.
the 2 guys that are going to play in the Dome on Sunday,
Yeah,
they didn't play their rookie years.
that's true. That's true.
Like, this guy, not only did he have to play as a rookie,
Jalen Hurts also got benched in the national championship game.
Yeah, he
by the
did.
greatest coach of in
and he was right, and he was right to do it. I mean, turns out too, it was pretty good
Yeah.
too. But like, I just can't judge. Like, I am more inclined. I don't think Spencer Rattler this year could have proven to me he's going to be a star,
and he couldn't.
but he couldn't disprove. There's nothing he could have done this year that would make me say he thinks he'll never be any good.
I completely
So
understand.
I think that's kind of where I am with Rattler. If again the offense was totally healthy and the only injury was the car, and he had Olave and Shaheed and
Right.
Taysom, and he had everybody at the offensive line was healthy, I might feel differently.
right.
But man, like,
You're saying I'm being a little harsh on the guy.
I get it. I'm not gonna.
And it's
like,
okay. I mean,
I'm
look,
not discarding
Say what
Spencer
you
Rattler
think. Say what-
because of what you just said. The plays where you go, wow, like
there were definitely wild plays.
they're wild
I mean, there's
plays,
no
man. So
question.
it's in there.
There were
So-
wild plays. I mean, you're right. It's in there, but can you get it out on a consistent basis? Do I want? I mean,
Play
I
him
guess-
in 2025.
I guess
Let's
my,
find out.
My scariest thing is covering this team for the last 6 games. The last 11 games of the season was absolute torture.
Yeah,
Okay?
they were awful.
I mean, it was absolute torture talking about the same damn thing every damn day on this show with the same people frustrated and me understanding their frustration. I don't know that being able to go through that for an entire year, and I guess to be great, maybe you have to. I don't know. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Man, the thought of even doing that again.
Here's the thing, Jim. Like,
incredibly
you
frustrating.
reframe your perspective, right? Like, if going into last year, we all still had the perception that the Saints with Derek Carr could win a
Right.
bad division, be a playoff team, and then even amid the 7-game losing streak, they still weren't mathematically eliminated. Like, you could. You go into next year. Understand, like, and again, I agree with you. I don't think they're cutting Derek Carr. I agree with you.
I don't
But
think it's in their DNA.
if you did, we would all be going into this year looking at it going, okay, let's look for signs of progress and what it means for the organization moving forward. It's like when I go back to the Bengals example, when Joe Burrow was there as a rookie and they won 4 games that year, they were coming off a year where they won 1.
Yeah.
So they quadrupled their win total. So, like, a 4-win season, I mean, don't stop traffic or anything,
Look.
but like, you can see the improvement there.
And look, I don't think Zach Taylor's that great of a coach, but Joe Burrow, I mean, it just goes to show you how one person, just like Drew Brees, changed the course of a franchise. I mean, as great as people think Sean Payton was, they didn't do any of that crap without Drew Brees.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt about it. So the course, I mean, I guess I just don't. You talk about is what we have now acceptable? No, I just think that Derek Carr is the bridge to the future, and by no means, no way, shape, or form do I think Derek Carr is the future of this franchise. I think he's the bridge to whoever is, I just don't think that the other end of the bridge is here yet.
You might be right.
And so that's why I completely agree with you that next year's draft, the 2026 draft, is going to be a lot like the 2024 draft, and I think there are saviors.
Which is why I
In that
want to
2026
align the
draft.
organization to be in position to take
I
that
hear
player
you.
in 2026.
Look, and I completely get that side of it, and I guess part of me is just I don't know that I can watch a whole year.
Or
full
maybe
Blues
you
and-
play another year and Spencer Rattler surprises us all and is awesome. And you're like, you know what? I think you got a guy here.
Okay, Uncle Big Nick says he says you're a great watch and listen, and he hopes that you slap me soon. So I mean, that's not in your DNA. I know it isn't. All right, real quick before we end the segment, I do want to get your feelings on LSU right now.
Okay.
And look, I've had a lot of my regulars here aren't the biggest Brian Kelly fans on the planet. Okay, I happen to think that, look, just because things may not have worked out the way LSU fans want them to work out, I don't know that you're going to do much better than Brian Kelly, in my opinion. I think he's a great football coach. That's my opinion. And I think that this team is set up. And I know last year was frustrating. It was frustrating all the way around in Louisiana sports when you talk about football. Even Tulane was frustrating. But when you talk about LSU and where they are, and with Garrett Nussmeier coming back for his second year as a starter, I think this team and the depth that they have at wide receiver, the star talent they have there, I think the defense is going to be a lot better again. I think they have the right defensive coordinator. I am really looking forward to LSU football in 2025 because I think this has the makings of what could be a special year.
Yeah, if for everybody who is not sold on Brian Kelly, well, first of all, like, he is objectively a very good coach. He's been a head coach for more than 30 years, and he's won everywhere he's been. He is a good coach. The question is, can he win a championship? That's the conversation we're having.
Right.
Which is just it's a tick up. And he's gotten programs to the doorstep, hasn't been able to get over the hump. If Brian Kelly doesn't get this LSU team into a 12-team playoff, my whole narrative about Brian Kelly completely changes.
Mine too. I agree 100%.
Because you have everything aligned that you need right now. I've compared it, it's like Brian Kelly's first 3 years has almost been like balancing a scale. He came in and thought he had to do it one way, well, he saw it tip this way. And so then he had to kind of measure and went a little too far and overcorrected. A lot of that with portal, staff, NIL, everything. This feels like the time where they've got it. He's got a fifth-year senior quarterback who's going to be in his second year starting. You just signed the #1 transfer portal class in the country. You did this year what Ohio State and Ole Miss did last year.
Right.
You went and dumped a buttload of money into a portal class to have the best roster. You're getting Harold Perkins back off of injury. You're getting Jacoby and Guillory back off of injury, which nobody talks about. That was a massive loss for the interior of that defensive line. I mean, you should be in a 12-team playoff. Now, once you're there, a lot of it depends on draw. We saw what just happened with Oregon.
Absolutely.
Oregon had the best season. They got the worst draw because the whole screwy buys for the anyway. Like, I mean, we're sitting there watching Arizona State and Boise give me a bye. You want to let them in the field? Go ahead. But why, give me a break. So, but, I mean, in a 4-team playoff, the two teams that played for the championship, Ohio State and Notre Dame, wouldn't have even made a 4-team playoff.
I don't think anyone, and I'm assuming you feel the same way, to me, it's not even close that the two best teams in college football were Ohio State and Texas, and they played in the semifinals, in my opinion. And the third best team had to be Oregon, and they had to play after the bye on the same bracket. That whole bracket was set up to be just ridiculously stupid, in my opinion.
I don't know if I would say Texas was the second best team. I think they were very good and they were a
You can say
playoff
Oregon,
team.
even if you say Oregon.
Oregon, I thought, was so consistent all year. They just ran into a
But even
buzzsaw.
if you say that, they still shouldn't have been. The bracket shouldn't have been that way. I mean, I'm completely.
I mean, if you go back and look at the bracket, if they would have seeded it according to the ranking, 1, 2, 3, 4 have a bye, then 5 plays 12, and so on. You would have had more competitive early round games, and you would have had a more equitable bracket for the teams at the top, like Oregon. But in any event,
right, not force it so Boise gets 3 and Arizona State gets 4, or whether it was vice versa, I don't remember. But you're forcing that to happen.
To the point about LSU, if they're not in, then I have no more confidence in Brian Kelly to get them in, because think of it this way. when you go into 2026, right?
Right.
You're losing Garrett Nussmeier. I don't know what you're going to be at quarterback. You're losing this whole portal class that you just signed. You're going to lose Perkins and Guillory. Like, I mean, you are almost back to square one in 2026.
It's almost like when Burrow and company and they all left.
Yeah.
I mean, and we saw what happened with Coach O after that.
When you have a team full of NFL guys and they all go to the NFL,
Yeah.
it's hard to replace them.
No, look, I'm in the same boat.
How
Again,
about that for a hot take?
I mean, it's true, though. And I've been defending Brian Kelly, and I'm with you 100%. I am defending him the entire time that he's been here. But if he can't get this team to a playoff next year, then all bets are off. I can't defend him anymore.
I agree.
And it won't matter because whether we defend him or not, I don't see any scenario where they don't make the playoff.
You can say he gets fired?
I think they eat the money.
There's no way.
You don't think?
His buyout. Remember, Brian
You
Kelly.
don't think they eat the money?
No, he got. I'm telling you, they won't. He got a 10-year deal worth $95 million with 90% buyout guaranteed. They would owe him north of $50 million if they fired him next year. There is a better chance of me waking up tomorrow with as much hair as you as LSU firing Brian Kelly after the 2025
That would be the
season.
most watched morning scone in the history.
Scone wakes up and has hair. It's a miracle.
I love it. All right, do you think they make the? You think they do it?
Make the playoff?
You think?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I did.
I mean, you're returning a 4,000-yard passer. Everything they just added on defense, they were better on defense to begin with under Blake Baker than they were the year prior. Yeah, I mean, I think they got to figure out the offensive line.
Yeah.
You lose 4 starters there. You bring in 2 transfers. So you have questions there. But you figure out how to keep Garrett Nussmeier upright. That offense is going to be awesome, and the defense has talent at every level.
Yeah, I think that maybe they're picked even second or third in the SEC. Going into
I would
media
pick them
days.
first.
You pick them first?
I don't know who I would pick. People are going to pick Texas.
Yeah, that's. I mean,
and the only reason I might pick Texas would be schedule. I don't know. I think we have this assumption that Arch Manning is going to be Heisman Trophy, all that sort of stuff, because he's been so ballyhooed for so long. You just got to prove you can do it over 12 weeks and 8
I
SEC
think Garrett
games.
Nussmeier has an excellent chance to win the Heisman Trophy.
He's got the second best odds.
I mean, I really think
Yeah,
he has an excellent chance to win the.
It's Arch, Nuss. Those 2 best odds to win the Heisman.
I think Garrett Nussmeier is going to be a legit NFL quarterback.
I think so too.
I mean, he doesn't necessarily fit today's prototype, where the guy that can run around and do everything, and but he's Joe Burrow-esque. He's not as good as Joe Burrow, but he's Joe Burrow-esque, I think. But Joe can run too, but when he wants to.
Garrett was better in his first year as a starter, as a 4th-year player, than Joe Burrow was as his first year as a starter.
But not as good as Jaden Daniels in it.
That could be debated by LSU fans about what Daniels was in 2022, his first year in Baton Rouge. I thought, look, you had a sieve for an offensive line, and you needed Daniels' running ability. His mobility saved your offense that year, and his ability to protect the football. But all you heard from people was, why doesn't he take more chances? I'm like, because you're not very good and you can't keep turning the ball over. So, anyway, I thought Daniels was excellent in 22. That's debatable.
Jaden Daniels, at some point, in my opinion, is going to win an MVP. And I think he's that good. I said it. I'm not saying anything I haven't said for 2 years now. I think Jaden Daniels is like a unicorn. I mean, I know there are other quarterbacks, but to me, when you combine everything that he does and the way that he reads everything, as cool as he stays, I mean, he is a lot like Lamar Jackson in a way, but I just like the way he throws the ball better than Lamar Jackson.
Oh, the accuracy.
And
that was the knock on him when he came to LSU, was he was inaccurate.
Phenomenal.
And think of that
That's
now.
Insane.
Yeah.
Lastly, why is LSU, and this is a question a lot of people have, why is LSU playing at Clemson in week 1?
As opposed
Besides
to what?
money.
Just why they're
Middle
playing the
Tennessee
game?
State.
Well, I mean, they booked that game forever ago.
I know
and
it didn't happen last year. But
the thing is LSU fans wanted to see marquee games, and so LSU for years started booking those neutral site games. Remember, like they played Oregon in Dallas, they played TCU in Dallas,
Florida
they played
State.
even before Florida State, but played Miami in Dallas,
right.
they played North Carolina and Atlanta. Anyway, and then fans started saying, well, we love these games. Why don't you play them on campus? So they started booking home and homes. They booked the home and home with UCLA,
right.
home and home with Clemson. They had one with Oklahoma that got scrap because Oklahoma's now in the conference. So, I mean, this was something to appease the fans who said,
Do you like that?
yes.
You like opening up with a. Now, look, if you win it, it helps you immensely.
You know what I don't
later.
like? You know what I don't like?
Losing?
No.
Okay.
I love games that people want to see. What I don't like are garbage games that are nothing but rent-a-wins
Western
that
Kentucky.
nobody wants to see at all. But the problem is you have a sport, which we all love, that is a completely inequitable scheduling model, so it doesn't benefit
Amen.
you to put together a schedule of games
Amen.
people actually want to see.
Amen.
So a quarter of your schedule ends up being hot, steaming garbage.
Right.
Do I want LSU to play Clemson? Absolutely. I want everybody to play 12 games like that so we all see games we want to see. And you know what? You're going to have a real playoff instead of letting a bunch of dopes in a hotel ballroom in suburban Dallas debate things like game control over who they think should get into a playoff. Meanwhile, undefeated Florida State doesn't even get a chance to play. It's the stupid. We love college football in spite of itself. College football is its own worst enemy. So do I want them to play Clemson? Hell yeah, I do.
I mean, there's got to.
But I want everybody to do it.
One day in the summer, I'm going to have you on, and we're going to come up with ways. Not that they're going to listen to us, but I think it would be fun because I have said for years that college football and the NCAA as a whole has done everything they can to make sure to find their demise. Okay, they have tried to find their. It's just so big they can't screw it up, but yet they still screwing it up, and somehow we still keep watching it, and it's just.
They're really good at
It's
making
so
money.
frustrating, isn't it?
They're really good at making money.
Because, I mean,
man.
honestly, in the grand scheme of things, there's not that much better. Look, I'm a big prep football guy. I love calling. I'm a play-by-play guy. I've been doing it for 11 years. I love calling prep football. But honestly, if college football would straighten itself out, because I'm also an NFL guy, there'd be no way that anything could top college football if they fixed it. And I just don't know if they know how to fix it. We're gonna have a show in the summer. You and I are gonna have a 45-minute talk, and we're gonna talk about how to fix college football.
I already know how to fix it, but we'll do that in the summer. I got my ideas already ready.
Matt Moscona, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jim.
ESPN Radio Baton Rouge. Every morning on YouTube, find him. The Morning Scone. He doesn't miss. It doesn't matter what's going on. The Morning Scone is there every morning. You can depend on it
We'll be there.
like you can depend on your morning coffee. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, man. See ya.
Talk to you soon. Matt Moscona here on the Dattitude podcast. We are waiting on Mike Detillier, who told me he might be a little late. Now, I'm going to go back on some of my comments right here. Before we do all that, before we get to the comments, and then I know Mike is going to be here. If not, there are plenty of people around. And I like yesterday when I couldn't have, I'd have had to like go walk about 100 yards down to find someone. We told you earlier we'll let you know more about how Evangeline Securities can help you figure out what your family-run or privately held business might be worth and whether it's time to sell. How do they do it? Well, after their complimentary valuation of your company, if you decide to proceed, native New Orleanians Nick Braden, Ron Hemelt, and the folks at Evangeline will begin an extensive auction process from among established private equity funds from around the world. That's right, around the world. It will maximize the return process for the founder and his or her family. Evangeline Securities is the top producer on their platform. Very few companies like them in this area, and none with their dedication and success. They are fully licensed and ready to serve you. So get in touch with Nick and Ron about what's really important. Brian Kelly, it's not LSU. Not the Saints coaching search. You know what it is. What is the most important thing? Gabe, tell him. He just told me. It's the rest of your life. You can find him at www.evangelinesecurities.com. I don't know if you're ready to come on, Gabe, but I think I'm going to have you on for a minute. Grab these headphones again. And actually, I know Gabe wanted to talk a little bit about what we were talking about. Sir,
hey.
While we wait for Mike Detillier, a couple of comments here that I did want to show. Let's see where it was. John Carter says, Matt is right. Got to pull off the Band-Aid. You were saying in your comments that that's basically what you've kind of been saying with the Saints. Brian Cabot says Rattler would have been 0-6 with all those starters in place. Maybe.
That's a little harsh.
Probably,
That's a little
in my
harsh.
opinion. I don't know. Let's
He
see.
would
what
have
else?
won at least one.
Apathy says 100% Derek Carr might be the most hated Saints quarterback since Wade Wilson by this fan. Actually, Apathy, I think is hated more in a way. I would think I would go as far to say that Derek Carr might be the most hated quarterback in team history.
Here's the thing with saying stuff like that.
I can't hear you now, Gabe.
Interesting.
Go ahead and talk though.
Okay. Here's the thing that gets tricky there is when you start looking at most hated throughout history, you now have to look at the social media era of not only sports but the world where everyone gets a voice and they can express their opinions freely. So that's really where I think the differences lie.
I hear you. I literally can hear you now.
Good.
Rattler was a 5-star recruit
He was.
out of high school. That doesn't do anything
was.
for me. Rookie in the NFL, Corey with no help. By the way, Corey, you asked me earlier if I told my story about Tom Dempsey yet. I have not, but I will in a little bit. What you got for me? Tuesdays, a rare Tuesday with Gabe.
Yeah, just kind of building off of what you and Matt just talked about in relation to Brian Kelly and LSU. My one thing is, my biggest takeaway from the whole Greg Brooks story was the fact that Brian Kelly, as Matt said, it's important to note that there are two sides to every story. But my biggest, I guess, concern was the fact that they said Brian Kelly hadn't reached out in over a year, which is just inexcusable behavior. Not as a football coach or a representative of a university, but as a human being.
I don't disagree with that at all.
If you're in, I mean, especially from someone in a leadership position, we are talking about a guy who has undergone tragedy after tragedy. And it doesn't matter if he's ever going to play for your team again. This was a guy who was a captain for you, who went out and put his body and his life on the line every time he suited up for LSU. And this is how you're going to treat it? I mean, people have, and I've long defended Brian Kelly and his character. Yes, he comes across as an asshole sometimes. Whatever. That's just being, anyone who's been around a football locker room knows that coaches can be snarky. They can scream at players. Whatever. People can have their digs at him all they want. But this is the first thing that's truly made me step back and just say, you know what? I'm ashamed if this is true.
Yeah.
Of the representatives and the leadership at LSU, because that's just, I mean, frankly, it's inexcusable.
And it's not just the bad look, Gabe. It's like, why wouldn't you take an extra step? There's probably things we don't know, and maybe there are
100%.
certain reasons, but why wouldn't you just take the extra step and say, I mean, as far as you're concerned as a university, just spend whatever it takes to make this right.
No, not only that, I mean, I understand Brian Kelly's a busy man, and I get that, and that's what people are going to say. It doesn't take time to even send a text,
right,
or make a phone call in a day.
And
to someone in a situation like that, I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what Greg Brooks or his family have gone through. But a simple text or a phone call, or just showing up to be by his side, saying hi, just showing them that you care about him, that goes a long way.
I agree with you, and Mike's about to come in here. Lastly, Sean says that I must be a calming effect because that's I'm not a calming effect on anyone. So we know that's not true. Gabe, stick around, end of the show when we're going to finish our thought, but other side, Mike. Mike's going to come in now, and we're going to talk, but stick around. I want to finish this conversation.
Yeah, sure thing.
Joining us now here on Radio Row, the man, the myth, the legend. He's got his binder. His binder's almost as big as my gut. Not almost.
What? Come on now. Come on now. You
Mike
stretching it.
Detillier, football analyst for WWL Radio. We're so proud and happy to have you.
Thank
here
you.
On set
I got
with
held
us.
up by Ro Brown over here. I
That's
told him,
easy
man,
to
at
do.
least he didn't take my money.
And look, your people are right next
Oh,
to
yeah,
us.
yeah,
over here.
we
They
right
put all
across.
the locals together, so I do think that's kind of cool. What's going on today, Mike? Look, this is like, you've been around Super Bowls before. I mean, to me, this is the craziest.
Yeah, and the worst days are Wednesday and Thursday.
Yeah, I know.
That's when it really is the fullest. Now, we've been told credentialed media, a little more than half of them have reached here. So that means tomorrow and Thursday, they're going to have some people here.
And Norman and I were talking earlier. I mean, we already say this 3 times. You were here yesterday. 3 times as many people here today as were yesterday. So I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Twice.
Now,
as
the
many.
only thing yesterday at 6 o'clock is like somebody hollered fire, you know, in a nightclub or something. Man, I'm looking around. I don't hear nothing.
I've
And
got
it
on
was
the shuttle.
just us and a radio station from Las Vegas. Everybody was going to the Superdome.
Now I got
you
on
know.
the- Yeah, I wish I would have stayed here with you. It was insane.
It was kind of
In
crazy.
fact, I showed this before, and for people that aren't here, if you could see my screen, Mike, but I'm going to show this again. I'm going to show, this was the crowd yesterday when for the Eagles portion of it, and I'd gone to the end of if you look at the far end is where you come out of, okay? And I realized I had already walked to the other end, and I had to walk back to get out, okay? So that's when I realized I'd made it. Now, here's the difference, okay? When the Super Bowl was here last in 2014 or whenever it was, I was working in news, so I did not cover that Super Bowl. 2002 is the last time that I covered the Super Bowl here. Here was Media Day back in 2002. Take a look at this. Here's 2002. Just a little bit different.
Yeah, just a tad.
I mean, just a little bit different.
Just a tad.
Then,
the thing
than
about it
today.
is, this has not only become a sporting event, it has become an entertainment event.
Right.
Because it is the blend of the entertainment world, sports world, every other world sort of is involved here. I came in yesterday, and the first people I saw were from Entertainment Tonight. You know, so
Yeah,
my deal
exactly.
is, okay, Entertainment Tonight's over here.
Exactly.
And, you know, and People Magazine and some of the other places. Okay, you know that it has really morphed into something that, and I was telling the story about Dave Dixon yesterday. Dave had told me that when they tried to get the first one, Super Bowl IV, he was like, you know, how we got it was a big sell on weather. They had done a 10-year study, and 9 of the 10 years, it had been sunny in the 70s, beautiful weather. They had never got that for the 3 games in Tulane Stadium. Didn't get any of that. Now they got a sunny day when the Cowboys played the Dolphins, but it was the coldest Super Bowl outside
And
ever.
wasn't Chiefs Vikings super cold as well? And
Yeah, it was, and it was overcast, and so was Steelers Vikings. And so Dave was like, Papa Bear Hallis comes up to me, and he was like, David, you better go back and not pay that guy that did that study.
I love it. I love it. Mike Detillier here with us on the Dattitude podcast, brought to you by Evangeline Securities on this rare Tuesday edition of Dattitude here on Radio Row, Convention Center, New Orleans. We're having a lot of fun. But, Mike, I love those old stories. And what kind of guy was I never got to meet Dave Dixon. What
Dave
kind of,
was a great guy.
I mean, he is literally, to me, if Dave Dixon wasn't born, I don't know that any of this ever happened, really.
Well, the Superdome would not have been built.
Yeah.
It would not have been built. Oh, it certainly wouldn't have been built in the mid-'70s.
Yeah.
But Dave was the catalyst to all of that. Also, too, he was the ambassador in the 60s to get a NFL franchise in New Orleans. He lobbied hard, and he said, you know, with all of that lobbying, he really thought they would get a franchise for 1966.
Yeah.
That went to Atlanta. And he said, man, I was so disappointed and everything. And he said, you know, we were looking for something that could give us the spark to get us here. He said, we had just got off of Hurricane Betsy.
Right.
It was the AFL moving their All-Star game out of New Orleans because a lot of players, black players, complained about the treatment, moved out. Then he says, we lose it to Atlanta. So what more could go wrong? And he said, we got the lightning strike. We didn't know the NFL and AFL were looking to merge. And he said, neither did
They
the two
didn't know it
commissions.
yet. They
did
didn't.
not know it yet. And so he said, all of a sudden, I make the announcement, oh, well, we need antitrust exemption. How are we going to get that?
Uh-huh.
And came to me and said, you know, Hale Boggs, don't you? We got to get it out of that committee he's in. And the president of that committee, who was a representative from New York, was dead set against it. He thought it was bad for the game, bad for the players. They put that bill, him and Russell Long, put that bill on an amendment that the President of the United States, Lyndon Johnson, wanted passed. And if the president at that time wanted something passed,
It got passed.
it got passed. They put it on the amendment. So the Democratic guy who was head of that committee had to vote yes or no. And he was basically told, if you vote no, you're funding to your community. No. So it was a little bit of a trade-off into the deal. And so
Different world back then.
yeah,
Although
totally
they
different.
still play
It's
the same
sort of
games.
thing today.
They still play
Same
the same
games.
game.
And so he said, Mike, that was a little bit of a trade-off with it. But he said that's basically kind of what hot. And he said, so we make the announcement, November 1st,
Yeah.
All Saints Day. We didn't have a coach. We didn't have an owner.
You didn't know who any of your players were going to be.
Nothing. And so he said it was pretty quick.
How did they find John Meekum?
He was one of
He was a Texas guy, wasn't
Yeah, one of 4 guys, but his dad owned, I think, one of the biggest stretch of oil and gas
Okay.
leases in the Gulf and also in the state of Louisiana at that time. And if you ever watched the show, The Early Days of Dallas, the movie,
Yeah.
he was Bobby Ewing.
Okay.
Okay, he didn't really do too much, but he was the guy. He took you out to eat, have a good time, maybe bend the elbow, that sort of
As
thing.
long as he wasn't JR.
And tried, but sometimes that didn't work. But I think Diliberto used to always tell me that the dad slipped him on us because he didn't want him working with him, And man, you went through all those years. But Dave told me, like Buddy always says on my tombstone, I'm the guy who recommended the Saints and Mike Ditka to be a combination. Dave Dixon says
did.
on my tombstone, it should read, I'm the one who recommended John Meekum to the other NFL owners. Because he said he was young. He was like 26, 27
It ended up
years
working
old.
out, though. In
After 20
1985
years.
In 1985, it ended up working. I didn't want to ask this of Matt Moscona, but you could appreciate this question. Can you imagine if Drew Brees hadn't come here, he went to the Dolphins, and the Saints got Dante Culpepper, and you had Dante Culpepper and Dante Stallworth in the same team, what would Buddy D have done then? Because if you remember, he used to call him Stallpepper. So what the hell would a Buddy D have done?
I'm not sure about all that, but first time I heard it, this is days before the Saints ended up picking Stallworth, and we met up at Deanie's in Bucktown
Okay.
with Randy Mueller.
Okay.
Randy was a GM at that time. And, Buddy's talking to him, and he said, Mike thinks that Dante Stallpepper is going to be there when they pick. And Randy gave me this look. I said, he's talking about Stallworth. And he was like, you sure? I said, oh, yeah.
You had to translate for him.
And so he said, yeah, whatever. The guy Mike said, he's like, Buddy, I don't know. I don't think
from Tennessee.
he said, I don't think he's going to be there when we pick. He said, I think he'll go a little bit earlier than that. And he said, now, if he's there, we are going to pick him because we really think the world of him. And so he never said it again. And I'd done a few shows and it was always Stallworth. So, man, the Saints come up to pick and it flashes on the screen and he comes up on there.
Excited,
and it was distinct. The Saints have picked Tennessee wide receiver Dante Stallpepper. That was it. Everybody in the crowd, they floored
I could
him
never
that
call
day.
him anything else after the Stallpepper. Let's see. I don't know what he's saying. I got some. Let's see. Uncle Big Nick says it's going to Detillier. You got to try and follow up that Friday. Yeah, he's coming on Friday. JC Brar, who's from Denver, he says, "What's going on?"
Oh,
Mike?
JC. He's a partner of mine. He send me a text every once in a while. He was in the wine and liquor business, on the bayou. Yeah.
Well,
so I knew him well.
You got to know people in the wine and liquor business down the bayou. That's for
yeah.
sure. No, but I was thinking about that earlier because he started talking about Dante Culpepper, and I'm like, it just came in my head. I'm like, Matt's not going to appreciate it. I'm going to save it for when Mike comes on. Buddy D. But where did Dave Dixon, how did he rise into prominence in New Orleans?
Dave was basically involved in the art business.
Okay.
But he was prominently involved with Tulane at that time.
Okay.
Right? And he was on their board. And so he had a lot to do with Tulane athletics. And his story is really funny, is that he called Lou Holtz up in mid-'70s. Now, Lou's a hot coach now in the college ranks. And he calls Lou and he said, I'd like to talk to you about a job. And he flies over Raleigh, North Carolina, talks to Lou and tells him, said, listen, the job's open at Tulane if you'd like to have it. This is what we... He said, well, I thought you were coming over here offering me the Saints job. I said, I'm not. He said, I'm not interested in that. And the next year, he takes a job with the Jets.
That's right.
He doesn't even last a year.
I forgot that he went into the NFL for a short period of time.
He didn't last a year, quits.
He was on TV for maybe it was the national maybe it was the national championship game because Notre Dame. He's got to be like 91, 92 years old.
And you know he's still now he doesn't move around well, but man, he can still talk.
I bet he can.
He can still talk. And Jerome Bettis always says, you know, about when he was recruiting him, and Jerome lived in the inner city in Detroit, and he said, man, you know, they had already had a Cadillac car stolen from a coach before. And so he said, apparently it got back to Lou. Lou pulls up, you know, they had a driver, pulls up. He tells Jerome, is my Cadillac's going to be okay outside? But Jerome said, man, he was great, and he knew how to work the room, and he knew my mom had the deciding say. And he said he was really smart. Said he was a great recruit. He said, I enjoyed playing for him. Now, he said he was quirky.
Yeah.
But which coach isn't?
No, not
I grew
a
up
good
with one. I grew up with one. He's as quirky as could be. Now, he's not coaching now, but he was quirky when he coached now.
Yeah. Hey, how you doing there, Mike?
Hey, what's going on, T-Boy? What's happening? What's happening over there?
Yeah, I've told the story many times when he was out watching his son play at Mandeville, talking about Coach O, and he'd call me over and go, hey, Jimmy, who you like over there? He goes, this kid at McDonald's 30. He started asking me all kinds of questions about players that Mandeville wasn't playing, and I'd tell him what I thought. I was covering prep. You know, he knew I knew everybody. Hey, Jimmy, what do you think about this guy and this guy and that guy? And I'm like, why is he asking me all this? And then next thing you know, he's the defensive line coach at LSU. And I'm like, oh, that's why he was asking me.
Yeah, he sat out that year. He had a couple opportunities, but he really thought he was the interim head coach for Lane Kiffin. Out about every player in the area. He had his own mental little card on every man, Daddy remembers really well. If you tell him something, even back from 20 years ago, he'll remember that you said that about a player.
It's insane.
And he says he won't coach again, but I told him I gotta see that non-coach to believe it.
I think he's going to do something.
I think eventually he will. He's doing some consultant work with the Miami Hurricanes.
Okay.
I wish he'd have coached them on defense. They were El Lauzio. Their offense was terrific, but their defense was so bad. His two sons, the twins, one coaches Cody and Parker coaches the quarterbacks and wide receivers for the Hurricanes, and Tyler, his stepson, coaches the tight ends, and he's an analyst at Tulane today.
And you know, when the first time I ever met Coach O, it was because of Cody, but Cody wasn't playing football; he was playing tennis. He won the state tennis championship as a sophomore. Blew everybody away as a sophomore. And he said, okay, I won a state championship. That was boring. I guess I'll go play football now.
And he felt a little pressure, too, to play, I think. Because Parker was a terrific receiver.
He was.
And I think he felt that deal. Hey, let me go play with Parker and see how this works out.
And if Parker would have been about 4 inches taller, Parker would have been in the NFL.
Parker could play now.
There's no doubt about it, in my opinion.
And then Parker got, a number of concussion issues that ended his career. He was at McNeese, and ended his career prematurely.
Well, you're the New Orleans historian when it comes to football. You and Jim Rapier are my two go-to guys when it comes to talking about New Orleans history of football. My number one question is, and we've talked about a lot of things with this current team, if you take this current team where they are right now and compare them to where this team was in 2005, what are the similarities and what's like there's nothing? I mean, there's got to be some things that are very similar, but there are also some things that, not alike. I think one of the things, and you can't compare Kellen Moore to Sean Payton, but I'm just saying Kellen Moore is in a similar situation to where it's about 4 or 5 years younger than when Sean was when he came here, but maybe he could be that guy. Maybe he could be the next Sean Payton. I'm not trying to put any pressure on him, but if he does come in here and coach this team, but you think back to 2005, Mike, there wasn't a lot of hope for this team coming off of Katrina. You didn't even know where they were going to play football.
And you weren't sure if they were going to stay in New Orleans. Because I really believe this. that if it would have been left up to Tom Benson
been in
himself,
San Antonio.
they'd have been in San Antonio.
I agree.
So that's some revisionistic history done on that today, but that was no doubt that at that time he felt as though he had to move the team to San Antonio. He didn't have a stadium, and I think that was the blockage from him really making a hard push. But the NFL would have had such...
Mayor Hamburg or whatever his name was trying to get this team to go. He was desperately trying to get this team.
But it would have been such a public relations disaster for the NFL. You could see why they stepped in. Sean was his own sort of guy. And he was mercurial.
Right.
Every day you didn't know exactly kind of which Sean you were going to catch, the good Sean or the bad. But he had one of the greatest lines, and I say it about him all the time, and he still laughs. He said, I remember when I told you. And so we doing the coaches show on a Monday night, and Bobby's on to this long rant about something. And he was like, Mike, I don't know what they pay you, but it's not enough. And he said, all the thing I can tell you, Barry, is you're the only guy that can ask a question, answer a question, and then debate himself before I get a chance to answer it. And it was one of the great lines, and it's absolutely true. Bum Phillips told me this year.
I've been on your show when that's actually happened. He asked me a question,
he'll
answered
answer
it, and then he analyzed it. I just sat there like, okay.
Bum told me this years ago. He said, and it's a bum line, about you never know about a first-year coach because the first time he's coaching as a head coach. Now, I get what Bum's trying to say. You never can gauge a head coach for the first time. But, Jim, I remember this football team, and I got to work with him at WWL. Hank Stram is in Pro Football's Hall of Fame. He went to 2 Super Bowls.
Guy.
He won one. He didn't get it done here. Bum
He never got a chance to do it.
Yeah.
He confided him beforehand.
And I don't think that'll ever work between the two because their personalities were almost identical. And then Bum comes in, and he had great success with the Oilers. The only thing with Bum, he couldn't beat the Steelers when it really counted, in the championship games. And he didn't have, of all of them, he had the most success. But still, he did not get this team into the playoffs. And then Mike Ditka. He's in Pro Football's Hall of Fame, and we're talking about the Bears yesterday. Bobby was. Man, we go to Platteville to play him in practice. He's like, Mike, we were lucky to get out of there with a first down. I'm not talking about scoring. He said, I'm talking about a first down. And he said all those guys were rock stars.
Yeah.
They had 18,000 people out of practice.
That was when Bobby was a rookie. He'd just come over from the USFL.
And he was like, Mike, it sort of scared you a little bit. And so we had Eric Kramer on, and Eric was like, they were intimidating, almost like the scent, an odor that, man, if you don't make this work, something's going to happen. And Eric tells the story that he was with the Lions, and he said, I took a snap, and McMichael was, I don't know who's going to block me, but I'm going to tackle both of you. And he said he tackled me and Barry Sanders at the same time.
Mongo.
And he said, think about that, Mongo, and they had Dan Hampton. And Richard Dent. And Al Harris and Wilbur Marshall and Mike Singletary. It was like Otis Wilson. It was like, okay, how are we going to make this work?
That's before you even get to this. Well, you talked about Otis Wilson, but secondary, the 40s, the
Gary
defense was
Fensick.
named after Gary Fensick.
And I think about that. 90% of that team was drafted by Jim Finks.
That's insane.
And Jim
Who changed the fortunes of this football team.
Changed the fortunes of the Vikings, changed the fortunes of the Bears, changed the fortunes of the Saints. And then for 1 year, he was the general manager of the Cubs. They ended up winning.
I did know that because I'm a Cubs fan.
And they ended up winning.
They won the division for the first time since the 40s with Jim Finks as their.
And when you would sit with Jim, manager. If you knew baseball, he wanted to talk to you.
Jim Moore said that's why he came.
That he loved baseball. He loved to talk to you about baseball. But I said, well, what happened in Chicago? He said, part of my contract was I had final say on the head coach. And he said, so we're looking for a coach. They had fired Neil Armstrong, not the astronaut, but the coach. And he says, I get a phone call late one night from George Hallis, the Papa Bear.
Who wanted to hire Ditka?
And he was like, Mike, he's like, Jim, I just did something and you might not like it. And he said, what did you do? He said, I hired a coach. He said, Mr. Hollis, part of my contract is I'm the guy with the final say. Not in this. He said, it's Mike Ditka. He said, it was a very quick hang up. He said, I spoke to him the next day.
And he went and found Buddy Ryan?
He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll be general manager one more year, and then I'm going. You breached my contract, but I'll stay here one more year. And that was it. They got Buddy Ryan, and then the friction wasn't between Finks
That was between
and
Ryan and Ditka.
And then it became Ditka and Buddy Ryan.
And then when Ryan went to Philadelphia, and they had some battles going on.
And then him and the Cowboys and Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah.
Man,
well, Buddy Ryan liked to piss a lot of people.
And he did.
Yeah.
And he did. And so, yeah, you just think about, that time in the 80s and early 90s
Right.
of those teams, and you think about the biggest what ifs in football. And for me, it's what if Jerry Jones's ego was not so large that he could have left Jimmy there? How many championships would they have won in Dallas?
Many.
The second biggest what if is, what if the Bears could have kept Jim McMahon healthy? Because they didn't need a lot of points.
No, and the Bears haven't been good really since then. They've had some glimpses here and there, but they're still looking for that right now. Will they get it with Ben Johnson? I don't know, but I don't know.
But the first year coach, I get what Bummer was trying to say, and that you never know. And his deal is, is that Harry Truman line, the buck stops here because you can't push the buck nowhere else. And he's right. You the final call.
Even with that, though, and even though nobody really knew who Sean Payton was back in January of 2006, I don't think it took long before people here got a lot of had a confidence that Sean Payton. I don't think anybody could have expected the Saints were going to go to the NFC Championship game in 2006. However, I think you felt confident that Sean Payton was going to be someone that was going to change this franchise a lot like Jim Mora did. Do you feel that Kellen Moore can, if that's who it is?
Let me see him coach.
Okay.
And then I'll have better, because I couldn't have told you that before Sean coach. Now, once you got a few games under you, say, hey, man, he got something here. And I've always told him this. I thought it was the best coaching job he ever did, year one. You're talking about 29 new starters on a 53-man roster. What? That's an unbelievable turnover. And, that one big caveat, Drew Brees coming off that injury. You didn't know if he was going to be able to play or at what level. Zach Strief, who, worked with us at WWL for years before he became a coach, Zach said, I never saw Drew Brees throw a pass more than 18 yards when they were in Mississippi training.
Right.
And he was like, how is this going to work? And he said the final preseason game, he played a couple of snaps, and he uncorked one, and they were like, whew.
He really can.
Yeah, he can do it. And he said, Drew was never worried about it, but he said, I think everybody else was this going to work out?
Yeah, I don't think Drew ever lacked.
So I think one thing, the quarterback situation is going to play a major part in his success or non-success on a franchise.
One thing Matt Moscona was talking about here, and look, we've talked about all other things. I don't think that you and I have ever talked about this. And so Matt and I disagreed on this, but I'd like to ask you your take. You think the Saints are better off? Are they better off just saying, you know what, we'll eat the money, we're going to save, but we're going to save money at the same time with Derek Carr, and basically just having to either go with whatever you can afford as a free agent, Justin Fields maybe about the best you can do. I don't know what else is going to be available. Or, God forbid, Spencer Rattler. Or do you think that they use Carr as the bridge and go forward? What do you think they're better off doing?
For me, until you get your finances straight and you get things in line, my thing is, I cut bait now. He's not going to be the quarterback in 2026.
Well, there's no doubt about that.
And so for me,
I agree with you on that.
Let's do it now. Let's save the year and see what else we can do and take a look at someone else at the quarterback position. First things first, though, once you do that, then you got to rebuild your offensive line.
Yeah.
Because I think that was something
that's my number one.
Sean did a very good job with early on in trading they traded back in round 2, and they ended up picking Roman Harper with that pick. But they also got Jeff Fain
Right.
from the Cleveland Browns.
Right.
And Jeff became a tremendous center. And I knew Mickey Loomis really liked him because a couple years earlier, when we had the same sort of meeting, instead of Randy, it was Mickey instead. Mickey said, we really think a lot of Jeff Fain. And then I was starting to hear that they were trying to move him. He became a big-time player for this team. And then to hit Jari Evans in round 4.
That's just luck.
And I think
That's luck.
other than Willie Roaf, he's the most dominant offensive
Who
lineman
just went
this
into the
football
Saints
team's
Hall of
ever had.
Fame this year, right? Just went into the Saints. Jari Evans just went into the Saints
Yeah.
Hall of Fame this year.
And he's up for the NFL Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and he should make it.
And I think he eventually will. He gets in this year or not. But for me, I cut Derek Carr off now. Now,
Look,
I don't think you can trade him. Who's going to take
you're not
that
gonna-
contract?
you can't trade him.
You're going to have to cut
No,
him
and
loose.
and then somebody's going to get him for a song because you're going to end up eating the money. And
Okay, and then my thing is with a player, the book's been written on Derek Carr. You have seen he is not going to get better. He is who he is at this stage, and that's not going to change. You just wishing on a star if you think that's going to change because you had a coaching change.
I don't think there's any doubt that Derek Carr is not. I agree with you 100%, and I've said this, that I don't think Derek Carr is the future of this team at quarterback. That he can't be, but he could be a bridge. And I just think if you want to be competitive, and maybe you don't. Maybe some people think, who cares if you're competitive as long as you get better in the long run. I just think the only way that you're competitive in 2025 is just you're paying it anyway, or paying it for a lot of it anyway. Just take them on, and maybe you have enough talent. If you can go get a tackle, I mean, ideally, in my opinion, you get a left tackle and you move Fuaga back to his native right tackle. You got a great center as it is, and Cesar Ruiz isn't fantastic, but I think he's okay. You still got a whole left guard. You don't have enough depth, but I think if you can start to work the offensive line and get another defensive lineman, I just don't think this team, I think they can still compete and be at least fun to watch next year.
My thing is,
But I understand the other side as well.
yeah. And the other thing, too, is you have your 2 receivers healthy. Okay,
I don't know.
playing a
That's
year
very
and you
true.
don't have Chris
That's very
Olave
true.
and you don't have Rashid Shaheed. I mean, that's big. Now, I think Taysom's going to come back. And
You do?
I got no doubt on that. No doubt that he'll
You think
come back.
September 5th or whatever, you think he's ready by then? I mean, I just think the kind of injury, I mean, the way he blew his knee out, to me, that's almost the thing that lingers into like October. I mean, now look, he's Superman. He can do things that other people can't do. But maybe, I mean,
I think he will. I
do?
think he will be back for the start of the season.
Okay. Well, if you can get him back, I think that makes a big deal.
You know, a big part of injuries, and I've been told this by a number of athletes before. See, it's not Taysom's first merry-go-round with a major injury.
That's true.
And that first time you have that major injury, you start to question yourself if you can come
That's
back.
true.
Now, he can come back because he's been through it so many times. I think the process, he knows very well how to rehab himself to get to that point. I think if it would have been a first-time major injury, I'd have said probably not. But I do think because he's been through a lot of different injuries, I really believe come September he'll be ready to roll.
How is this, and we've talked about this a little bit, but does this coaching search, I mean, the Saints have basically become, whether they are or they aren't, they have basically become, the administration has become a laughingstock nationally. I mean, there's no other way around it. I mean, you look at social media and people are making, how did the Saints change their fortunes going these last few weeks and making it so they got all this egg on their face? How do they clean that up?
Okay, there is perception and reality check here all across the board. Because, you might perceive it to be, but it also is in the minds of a lot of different guys that would have looked at this job.
Right.
And so, you know how you cure all that? You win.
Yeah.
That's the only way you cure it. Because you know what? If this team ends up being 3-14 next year, people are going to say, it's the same people doing it. It's just different coaches. So the only way you change it is to win.
Is there any pressure and then we've talked about this, and then we both agree that Mickey Loomis leaves when Mickey Loomis wants to leave. But if they have the year that a lot of people think they're going to have next year, and they do go like 3-14 or 4-13, and they find themselves in a position to be picking in the top 5 of the NFL draft, does that put any pressure on a Mickey Loomis?
Yes, I think it would. That, hey, listen, we're going to have to go in a different direction. But for this year, I had no doubt. Man, I was reading all kind of stuff about, I got from inside sources. My thing is inside sources. You kidding, right? Now, people hit the erase button real quick on a lot of them that put that out there.
Right.
But I had no doubt he would stay for this year. Now, beyond that, I think there's immense pressure on him to get this right and to change this roster. And so my thing is, it boils down to one thing. Will Wade told me this: talent procurement. He said, you can be the greatest coach in the world.
That's right.
If you don't have talent, you ain't winning squat
That's right.
anywhere. So it is about talent procurement. And then once you get it, to develop that talent. And sometimes.
But why? But I guess, and the frustration with a lot of people who watch my show, and I know a lot of people who listen to you every night, feel the same way. Why is it that there's only pressure on Mickey coming in now? Why is this the first time? I mean, why wasn't there pressure on him last year when he made this ridiculous decision, in my opinion, to keep Dennis Allen when we knew what was going to happen this year? It wasn't going to work out. I don't think any sane person who's followed this team thought that keeping Dennis Allen was ever going to work out. I mean, I understand why they hired him in the first place, but after last year and the way that it ended, so why wasn't there pressure on him before, and why is there pressure on him now?
I think the one-time slip-up now doesn't give you any more kind of wiggle room, okay? Because, if you've got somebody that has had success with you over a period of time and made you the money and been part of that group that, Gail Benson, taking kind of orders from Tom, that's what he wanted set up, she tried to do it that way. I do give her a lot of credit. She got involved mid-season when they got thumped by the Broncos and said, no.
So do I.
This isn't working. We got to let Dennis Allen go. And, she was close to Dennis's wife, the kids, everything. But still, okay, this is a business. And you got to understand that in this community, and it's small, what it means. The Saints mean a lot. That means a lot to the other 31 teams too, but especially here. Because we in football country.
I think the Saints mean as much to their fans, as much or more than any of the other 31 teams, in my opinion. I mean, I've gone to Atlanta. I know the Falcons don't mean as much to Atlanta as the Saints mean. Certainly in this division, I mean, Carolina's fairly new to the NFL in the grand scheme of things. I mean, Tampa Bay, I mean, you live on the ocean, or the Gulf, whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
I just think that of the places that I've been, and I can't say that about everywhere. Obviously, the Steelers mean so much to Pittsburgh, and you can think of other teams. Dallas means a lot to everybody across America, but I just think the Saints are a different breed, and when people come here who aren't from here and they see the fan base, even in bad years, they realize how important this is, and that's why it's mind-boggling for the majority of our lifetimes. They just haven't got it right, and they really got lucky twice. And only if you count the ultimate success, only once.
But I think about Buddy, and this had to be a couple months before he passed away, and he was like, Mike, and I was always the bad guy in this. But I was always the bad guy.
Right.
And he said, the more I hit him with Meekum, the more he dug his heels into saying, he said, if I had to do it over, I would be every bit as critical, but I would do it a little differently because other people were not critical.
Right.
Now, like he said,
they were afraid.
He said, the one thing with Pete, he was like a surgeon. He'd cut you with the knife all kind of different ways. And he said, eventually, he got to the same kind of setup I did. Pete Finney.
Yeah.
But he said, he did it surgically.
Yeah.
He said, with me, I hit him with the sledge and hit him again and hit him again and hit him again. But he said, the more I hit him, the more he became entrenched that I'm going to do it my way and
Yeah.
I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
And so he said, you know what? We kept bad general managers. We kept bad head coaches. Now, we live in a different world today. This changed the world.
There's no doubt about that.
Social media changed the world in a lot of ways. And so it's a
in almost
totally,
every
totally
way.
different world than it was back then. But I do think he had something there. That continual bang, bang, bang. And, okay, you're the only one saying it, right?
Right.
I'm going to show you wrong. And he said, man, Mike, did I go through some hell with that? And he said, you know, most people today, it's another generation. You know, they
Mike,
would never know.
I always wanted to be Pete Finney. I mean, I grew up with Pete Finney.
Oh, Pete.
Long before, look, I've been in the paper for 34 years, and long before I was ever at the paper, Pete Finney was my idol. But only Buddy Diliberto could have got 15,000 or 20,000 or whatever it was dudes to dress up as women and march down Poydras Street and into the French Quarter because he said he would dress up as a woman if the Saints ever went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I told this
Only
Dave-
Buddy D could
I
have
told
done
this
that.
Dave Bear. I
In
knew-
his death.
I told
After his death.
Buddy knew you would die before you had to do it. He didn't realize it was going to be that fast. And, you know, he'd have got a kick out of that. He really would have.
I did it.
One of the things, the three of us would sit and talk a lot. And so we had Salad Sam's one night. And Pete's telling the story that LSU would play in the afternoon, and they'd get in the car, and then they'd drive to New Orleans to watch Tulane play that night. So he said, man, we driving one night, and he said, man, I'm going over the speed limit. And he said, Buddy has one of these little portable TVs you plug into the lighter, and he had the antenna hung out of the glass trying to catch a game.
Kind of catch the Alabama, Georgia
Yeah,
game.
you figure he got money somewhere on it. So he said, man, all of a sudden these motorcycle cops pass me up, and then they circle back and stop right in front of us. So I had to stop. He said a big black limo comes right behind us. And he said one of the guys gets out and says, which one of you guys is Buddy Diliberto? And Pete he is. And he was like, he said, the governor would like to speak to you. It was Earl Long.
Earl Long. Wow, that was a long time ago.
And so he says, I get out of the car, and he said, Mike, they got no pavement on the side of the road, so I'm trying not to fall. I'm walking in there, and he said, man, he opens the door, and he's like, Buddy, come sit down. Come sit down. He said, I got to ask you a few things. He says, Governor, what you need to ask me? Man, I'm going to place a bet tomorrow at the fairgrounds.
I like the 3-horse in the second race.
So, oh yeah, man. But you had to hear Pete say, because it was really funny. It was like Pete was like, "Man, I'm sweating bullets of why all these cops are stopping
That's
us."
hilarious.
And they pulled Buddy out, and
There's a lot of people don't know. Buddy D actually was a newspaper man. That's how he got started. He wasn't on radio and TV. I mean, he ended up being a sportscaster.
And he actually did not want to do it. And he told me that when ABC started the local broadcast in the I think it was 66, he told me that.
Which was Channel 12 at the
Channel
time.
12, it was ABC, and they didn't have a lot of programming on at that time. But he said, Mike, I thought about it, and I met up with Hap Glaudy. And Hap was on Channel 4.
Who also was a newspaper man who was on Channel 4.
And Hap was, how much they going to pay you?
Yeah.
And he was like, man, almost.
More than we get.
He was like, it was like double what I was getting. Hap was like, well, why are you asking me for? That's sort of stupid, huh? Take the more money. He was like, yeah, but what if TV don't work out? He said, what do you mean what if TV don't work out? So, but he said, I was a little naive about how the TV would have morphed the way it is. And then, man, you think about in the 70s, the guy that took over sports from Hap was Diliberto.
Yeah, that's true.
Until he got himself in trouble 5, 8, 10,
because
12
he
times.
got a little over anxious, over exuberant with Jim McMahon and that whole thing. But that's a different.
And the owner too.
Oh,
that was
pissed
that,
Tom Benson off
they had script of his show every day. They were fixing to take him to court. Now they threatened it, never did, but they threatened it. He's the only guy that hung up on the president of the United States.
He hung up on the president of the United States.
He said, man,
Which one?
Nixon.
Okay.
He said, Nixon's supposed to do some fundraiser deal in New Orleans. And he said he's flying in, but he said, back then, there was no ESPN. You could figure
Right,
out,
of course.
who was the scores and everything else. And so he said, I'm early cause he said, man, all these streets are getting blocked because the president's coming. And he said, man, somebody says, buddy, there's a lady on the line. She says she's from the White House. Would you take the call? And he was like, yeah, patch him through. And he said, pick up the phone. And the lady was, Mr. Diliberto? And he was like, yeah. He says, hang on a second. The President of the United States would like to speak to you.
I can't imagine how it is.
And he's like, yeah, right. Boom, hung up the phone. So he says about a minute later, the phone rings again. And lady's like, buddy, something happened with the phone lines? You hung up? He's like, yeah, I hung up. This is a prank call. So same thing happened. The lady's like, could you hold on 1 second for the President of the United States? He's like, listen, well, I don't know who you're trying to fool, but you're not fooling me. He said, I hung up the phone again. So he said, the next time, the lady who answered the phone walked in there and she said, if you hang up this phone, I'm going to whip you behind. She said, it is the President of the United States. So he said, man, I'll pick up the phone. And the lady's like, Mr. Diliberto, we've had some trouble getting in touch with the President of the United States would like to speak to you. And he was like, okay. And he was like, buddy, this is Richard Nixon. I would like to ask you, because the Angels game got delayed, because he was good friends with Gene Autry, who that time owned the California Angels. He's like, could you tell me what happened late in the game? And he was like, well, hold on a second. Let me get the deal.
Are you kidding?
And he said, so, Mike, that's what he called me for. And he said, I gave it to him.
That's crazy that Richard Nixon would call Buddy D.
Well, because one of the aides that was on the presidential plane was a New Orleanian.
Okay.
And he was
said,
like,
I'll tell you who knows.
And he said, I know who could tell you what happened in that game.
Yeah. He was right.
And after 2 hang-ups,
Yeah,
but he was like, Mike, I can take that one to the grave too.
Here's another thing that you could only see on a Dattitude podcast. Occasion trying to do a Californians, talking as a Californian, a president. That doesn't happen every day. Mike Detillier trying to imitate Richard Nixon. We've seen it all, heard it all here on the Dattitude podcast. All right, one good question before we let you go. Mike, if it is Kellen Moore, Corey Terrio wants to know, who do you think would be on his staff? How would he get his staff? I mean, a lot of coaches who would be on staffs have already either been taken or. I mean, do you think he pulls some from the Eagles? I mean, what are you thinking right now?
I would not be surprised that he hired Nussmeier as his offensive coordinator.
I've heard that rumor.
He's the quarterback coach there. And also, it would give Doug an opportunity to watch his son for a year at LSU.
Makes a lot of sense.
And so, now where I would throw the most money is their offensive line coach, Stoutmire. I would throw a ton of money and says, listen, I know what you got there, but would you consider leaving to come here? And this is the offer I would get. Now, he does have a connection with Brandon Staley.
I was going to say, is there any? I've heard those rumors that Brandon Staley obviously has got a connection. He was his offensive coordinator before Jim Harbaugh took the job. Do you think Brandon Staley would be interested in being a DC again?
Well, he ain't going to be a head coach again. So the way I look at it, defensive coordinators today get paid pretty well.
They do.
In this league. Man, look what Chip Kelly got to leave Ohio State.
Go to the Raiders.
To go to Las Vegas. My goodness. You're talking about $6 million? That's a lot of cash, even if in Vegas.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. So my first move, I think, would probably be to see if I could convince Nussmeier to take the job as offensive coordinator. But I think the key hire is offensive line coach. And I would do everything I could to get Stoutmire away from Philly. Now, would he want that? I have no idea. And I think when you interview someone that extensively, he's already told you, this is who I'm going to hire.
Right.
This is who I'm going to look
He's
at.
He's not really spending this week doing this. He's already said in his interview. Yeah,
he's already done it, all of this. So it'll be a quick dot the I's, cross the T's, let's get it done, and let me try to get a staff together. And don't be surprised that he goes into the college ranks for a number of his staff people, because there's a lot of guys in college football that tell me today, Mike, you talk about this is the ultimate zoo. College football is the ultimate zoo. that every day you are recruiting players. At least in the NFL,
Right.
you got them under a contract.
Right.
And in college football, ain't no contract. You know,
They can
I'm
just
going
do
to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
And I do think more and more collegiate coaches who have some experience in the pros would be open to come to the NFL just because of the circus that college athletics is today, good or bad. And I think there is some good to it. You know, I'm not against paying players.
Right.
You know, come on. They were stealing money for years. The NCAA, they were the biggest bookies in the
There's no
world.
question. If
this-
they would have just paid him back 30, 40 years ago, we wouldn't be in this boat that we were in.
Now
Whole different-
it becomes a real difficult task for coaches to keep a team together, and it's year-to-year rebuilding
Right.
on a squad. And it does help, too, if you have multi-billionaires that are willing to give their money up, like a Larry Ellison
Yeah.
with Oracle, was a Michigan guy. Phil Knight with
Right.
Oregon. You know, Phil's in his late 80s. What am I gonna do with that money? You know, he's already told the people at Oregon, hey, whatever y'all got to do, win me a national championship before I die. They
had
came
a good
fairly
chance.
close.
They came close.
They came
If they
close.
wouldn't have been on that side of the bracket, who knows? All right, last thing, Mike. Can't let you go without giving me a Super Bowl prediction. What do you like? I mean, both of these things. This, to me, I know it's not the matchup that a lot of people wanted, but this is the matchup that I wanted because I thought it was the two best teams coming into
I
January.
agree with you.
That are playing football.
They were
right
the two best teams. I like the Chiefs here, 33-30. Again, I ain't putting a nickel against Patrick
now.
Mahomes.
How do you can't bet against God.
In a biggest game that you got there. Do the Eagles have the better team? Yes. But that doesn't always mean you win.
That's right.
Okay, and it's marginal how much better you are than the Chiefs. But in big situations, who would you want coaching that team? Andy Reid. Who would you want at quarterback? Patrick Mahomes.
Always Patrick Mahomes.
So I want to see, though, how the Eagles attack them because I do think Buffalo gave them a game plan of running the ball. Now, what Joe Brady did in the fourth quarter, I have no idea because you had so much
It was
success running the
very
ball,
mismanaged.
and then you unplugged it.
Completely mismanaged.
I mean, that to me,
That
people,
shows why he's not even ready to be a
that's-
head coach.
I agree with that. Now, eventually, Joe will.
Yeah.
He'll be a head coach. But coming off of that, it's almost like every team that has lost in those situations, they have tried to out Mahomes.
Well,
and
and-
you are not going to do that.
I also think on the other side of the football, Mike, and you're talking about Josh Allen and what Joe Brady was doing, I just thought Steve Spagnuolo completely outsmarted them. And I thought that, look, going into that game, there's no doubt in my mind that Steve Spagnuolo would rather play Buffalo than play Baltimore because when you play in Baltimore, you got the two-headed monster of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, and you don't know what's coming at you. You can focus on Josh Allen. And the reason why I think, and I've said this before, what scares me if you're Kansas City and you're Spagnuolo is it's tough to just focus on Saquon Barkley as good as he is because Jalen Hurts, although he's not Lamar Jackson, he certainly can do damage with his feet.
Yeah, and again, best offensive line in pro football, the best running back in
Yes.
pro football, and certainly one of the top 5 running quarterbacks in the NFL. And he's got some weapons on the outside.
Yeah,
That
of course he
SEC
does.
connection of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, who we got to see, at
And
Elite High School. One of the stories with him, with Devontae, he comes to our camp, David Elias Pro Football Camp.
They admit.
And meet Louisiana. And so he gets on the scale right before his junior year. He's 157 pounds. I'm like, what? And man, all the coaches say, Mike, that's a guy. I'm like, he's got. So I walked
was
up to
the
him,
guy.
and we start talking, and he had told me, yeah. He said, yeah. He's like, yeah, coach. I got like 38 scholarship offers. I said, wow, what? He ain't nothing. I mean, he ain't got
He's
nothing
like
on the hook.
I know.
I saw him run 2 routes, and I almost had to get a shovel to ungut the defensive back. He corkscrewed him into the ground twice, and I'm like, oh my God! And
And he completely took over in the state championship
and
game.
he just sort of flipped the ball back, and I'm like, I can see.
Yeah.
I can see. So I said, yeah, you plan on putting on? I don't think I'll be able to put on too much weight. And so his second number now is probably more of a 7.
I was gonna say he's probably 170ish. That's exactly what I was gonna say.
But he ain't too much bigger. And then
No.
A.J. Brown, Deuce always tells me that is the most liked picture I think you've ever posted on social media, and you posted a lot of them at Manning Camp. DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, and Deuce. The three of them, and I took the picture.
That's 3 bodies.
And
there.
so once I took the picture, Deuce was like, "Man, Mike, let me see it." And he was like, "I'm the smallest guy of the
Yeah.
bunch." Because
Yeah.
AJ, if you up next
He
to
is
him,
huge.
he's built like
So
a
is
big
Metcalf.
running back. No, DK is really tall. But we had Odell and Jarvis come one year. They caught everything one-handed.
Yeah.
I never saw them catch a ball with both
Right.
hands. Well, DK and AJ did the exact same thing a couple years later. It was like all these kids were like, whoa, look at this.
I can't even imagine them as high school kids.
And so we leave, and they came talk to us for a little while, and Deuce was like, man, like when I was in high school, they would be playing defensive line.
exactly, or tight end or something. Mike, it's always fun talking
Thank you,
to
Jim.
you.
Appreciate
It's
it.
a blast. And I'm going to take a little break when this is over. But when we get close to the draft, obviously, I'm going to want to talk to you again and get your thoughts, because nobody around here knows.
Okay, I'll
knows
give you a
these
little
players
hint
like
on
you.
something. Out of my top 75,
Yeah?
24 defensive linemen. Jim, it has
That's a lot.
never happened. This is 40 years for me. I've never seen in my top 75 ratings 24 defensive linemen in there. It is that way this year.
You know what that tells me, Mike? That's even more of a reason to draft an offensive lineman in the first round, because if there's that many defensive linemen, when you come back around in the second round again, there's going to be somebody that's in your top 75 that can start for you next
So
year.
if with that theory, is it going to be Matt Campbell? Will Campbell, excuse me.
Campbell,
Will Campbell.
yeah.
Would it be Will Campbell from LSU?
Will Campbell or the kid from Ohio State that was hurt the last half.
And
of the
Josh
year.
Simmons?
Yeah.
But
Anyway, I think it should. That's my
I-
opinion. That's the
I-
direction I think they should go.
Will Campbell is going to get a big buzz when he goes in the second season, what I call combine workouts, individual
Yeah.
workouts. You don't realize how big a guy Will Campbell is until you stand up next to him
Right.
and you say, whoa. And that kid started as an 18-year-old going up against grown men at LSU.
There's no doubt about it.
And-
Jason says, by the way, he says, you are the best analyst regarding college football. No one is close to hell with the ESPN. That's
Well,
what
thank you.
Jason says.
I'm going to send that to Bobby. Maybe he can get me a little raise.
Well, I mean,
No,
it's-
and he'll say, Mike, you don't need no more money in life. Yeah,
why you need my money?
No, he always tell me that, Mike, you don't need no more money in life.
From someone that played in the NFL.
Yeah, but he knows a little bit about my finances.
Well, he also knows a little about his own finances.
Well, that he really knows
I
a lot
mean,
about.
I'm just saying. All right, man, we're going to talk again soon. I
Thank
really
you, Jim.
appreciate you coming
Thank you,
on
buddy.
here.
Always my pleasure.
The great Mike Detillier, everybody. It has been a long show, but it was a great show. We started with, and look, if you're coming on late and you didn't see the whole thing, this is when's worth. This might be the longest show we've ever had. However, that being said, starting off with Adam Chernoff, the debate with Matt Moscona, and Mike Detillier, who knows all about the college football players, and he knows about the history of New Orleans football. We could literally, I think we could do a marathon. Maybe one day we'll do a marathon just to see if we could have like a 10-hour show. And one day, you might want to.
My wife would like that. I'd be out of her hair for a while.
We'll see if we can do it. But that is going to wrap it up. I thanks for all the comments out there. Kyle Sherman and all the other regulars. And I know we got some new people later. Kobe, N.A. Drought. You can listen to Mike Talk Football all the rest of your life. You ain't the only one. That's why we have him on here. And it's always fun. Tomorrow on the show, we are going to have, let's see, if I can remember. I know Larry Holder's coming on. I'm having Roman Gabriel III. All right, for all of you old people like me, Roman Gabriel's son. That's right, the former NFL quarterback. He just passed away not too long ago. He is going to be on the show tomorrow. I think Hannah Storm is coming on the show tomorrow. Who else did they tell me? Oh, I can't remember her name, but I've got a doctor who deals with all sorts of injuries that players are dealing with in the NFL. She's going to come on for 10 minutes or so. And then we have a guest from Caesars Sportsbook, who is the head lines maker, is going to be on the show tomorrow. He's going to come on for about 10 minutes and tell us how we got here on this line. You know, we're always going to spend part of a show talking about lines. And so the head of the Caesars Sportsbook odds-making department is going to come on tomorrow. We've got a jam-packed show, and who knows? Maybe we'll have whoever's popping around, walking around. I know I wanted to get Ro Brown on some kind of way. We'll try to get him on. So it is going to be fun. Tomorrow is the last day for the Dattitude podcast on Radio Row. We're going to take Thursday off because we've got a big weekend coming up. Friday, we're doing the show from back in our home studio. It will be at 1 o'clock. So tomorrow, back our same time for this week. 1 o'clock tomorrow, 1 o'clock Friday. So make sure you adjust to the time. I still can't adjust to saying afternoon. It's still been tough. But I want to thank everybody, of course, Adam Chernoff, Matt Moscona, and the great Mike Detillier for coming on the show. A reminder to subscribe if you haven't already done so. If you're watching on Facebook, please subscribe to our Dattitude YouTube page. That's where the Dattitude family lives. That's where all of our stuff from the past is. You can go find all of our past shows there. You can click the little bell to receive notifications when we go on the air live. And if you want to listen after the fact, you want to listen to it, the pod in your car, you can always find us, of course, on Apple, Spotify, many more, and find a replay of the show on NOLA.com/sports. Check out bet.NOLA.com. All kinds of stuff going on there. And then, of course, our insiders, which are going to be on, I think Zach said 9:30 to 12 tomorrow. And I know tomorrow's not a huge day for Zach. In fact, before I let you go, Saints Insider Show, I got to tell you this, so y'all check it out. On Thursday, let's see, where is it? I got to tell you who's going to be on the Saints Insider Show on Thursday. It's crazy. I know Drew Brees is going to be on the show. Where is it? Live TV, everybody, live TV. Okay, Deuce McAllister, Josh Jacobs, A.J. Dillon, and Drew Brees. All going to be on the Saints Insider Show live here from Radio Row. That's on Thursday. So there's no Dattitude podcast. You can check out the Saints Insider Show. You can also check them out at NOLA.com/Saints. Again, that's going to do it for us today. If you stuck with us for the whole 2 hours and 37 minutes, you are a trooper and a true member of the Dattitude family. We will see you tomorrow here live, beginning at 1 p.m. Everyone, take it easy, my friend. We'll see you tomorrow.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.